Welcome to the Infrastructure Services Committee. It's 10 a.m. We will start with a karakia timatanga, and Ms. McDonald will give us that. Hello, Marlene.
Kia ora, mōrena. E te aka, kakarau e te raki, o mai ki a mātou, tō kara, tō maramatanga, tō rangaare,
Wānginu I o mātou ngākau, ki te whakapai tā mātou mahi mō tēnei rā. Āmene.
Amen. And now we're on to public. Mr. Jakob Zawacki to come up and speak to us on speed limits of motorised vehicles in the city. And you'll see you'll get 5 minutes. The timer's up there on the corner and the microphone is yours. So basically with the mic, you turn it on. Everybody, when they speak, turns the other person's mic off. So yours will go off when someone asks you a question, then you turn it on again to answer. Away you go.
Kia ora, councillors. I was a bit prompted by coming here speaking on this topic by incident on SH1, and it reminded me the incident that happened to me as a child when I was about 9 years old, when we lived in the small village where the cars were scarce, and we lived kind of in a safe area on top of the hill. We were allowed to go wherever we wanted to go as long as we stay on the hill. However, there was an incident that happened that no one could predict, and that was that we got these small little puppies, and one of them broken off the leash and run down the hill, all the way down, and on the main street, where cars were still passing in good numbers, I would say, at the time. However, so what happened next was, when we ran down the hill to see the puppy, there was already a car standing in front of it, and the puppy was just okay running around the car. However, the adults were not really keen to help us, so it was all on the two children, me and my sister, both 9 and 7, to chase down the puppies. And it ran over the city center on another hill that looks very much like a serpentine line down here, which was one side was nice hills with the greenery on it. Second side was just the residential areas with the pavement and all fenced. So the puppy at one point actually ran on the road and got a hit by car. It was a 50-kilometer zone, and driver haven't seems even noticed. I remember today there was the situation where I actually was trying to reach for the puppy. As a kid, I wasn't really considering the dangers, what could be associated with that. And I went into the road, and somehow I decided to go back. And at that point, the second car passed. Like nothing happened, full speed. And he haven't stopped as well. So we are standing there with my sister, and at one point it was very quiet. We decided to get a puppy, and we walked all the way back home with him in our arms. And that made me think, do we need really to have this kind of speed limits to endanger our children? Because we're trying to make them safe as possible, but situations like this we cannot predict. That's why I come here today to suggest considering reducing the speed limits in the city to 30 kilometers per hour in the residential areas where the children can be, and to ensure they are quite safe. Yeah, so the clear benefit of this one would be the street would be safer for our children. And as my dear friend once said, the children should have as much freedom as they can cope with, so they can develop and have the adventures, have the opportunities to discover things. But the restrictions we put on the roads now are not allowing them to be unsupervised when they are in the younger ages. And yeah, that would be me a bit early.
No, thank you very much. No, it was a very clear presentation as to what you wanted to say. I've got Councillor Benson Pope wants a question. Anybody else want to ask questions? Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your presentation. There are a number of us around the table who would agree with you, I'm sure. But are you aware of the attitude of the current government to the lowering of speeds everywhere? In fact, they have a policy attitude of increasing them, and actually overriding decisions that councils like ours have made to lower speeds in residential areas? Yeah.
I'm aware of the latest national government decisions, and I think if there is no pushback on that they may happen. And it's even more scary than not doing anything, I think. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, the current government's given quite clear direction on especially 30km/h speed limits, which is you won't be setting them. So I don't know if you were aware that before the current government came in and the government and issued a new government policy statement on transport, we were actually in the process of lowering the speed limits to 30k in most of the residential areas of Dunedin. Are you aware of the fact that that is now suspended work because we can't do it under the current government, but it is sitting there to be done when the opportunity arises again? I have to ask questions, so I can't give speeches. So. Any more questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. It is actually in line with what we were already designing until the government policy statement on transport changed.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it was here before. I was not aware of that, and I think it's a great thing to do.
We were just about to go out in consultation when it all stopped. Yeah.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now, Mr. Rob Riddle, Tiger, wants to come speak on reducing waste.
Is red on, yes. Kia ora tātou. I'm Rob Riddle Tiger. I'm Executive Officer of Dunedin Community House, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to ask for your support for business recycling in the CBD. I've got 5 points to make. Number one, who we are. Dunedin Community House is a non-profit that offers offices, meeting spaces, services and opportunities for connection to other non-profits. We've got 21 permanent residents and around 120 other services are delivered from our premises. We're at 43 Princey Street, just off the Octagon over there. Sustainability is important to us. We recognise the moral necessity as well as the economic benefits. As part of our work, we assist house users to minimise their waste for our own work and those of everyone using the premises. Point two, the easier we make recycling, the more we recycle. We make it as easy as possible for premises users to minimise their waste, and it works. The vast majority of recyclable material is recycled, but it involves many different systems. From 900 square metres of office space, we save 1,700 litres from landfill each month. I've talked to other motivated businesses, and each says they struggle to find and fund solutions, so do not manage to minimise waste as much as they would like. And those are the motivated ones. On Friday, at the Keep Dunedin Beautiful Awards, we heard many inspiring stories. But amongst this was a comment that an employee at a supermarket is taking recycling home for disposal. Doing the right thing should not depend on the favours of staff. So point three, recent DCC changes have been great, and there's more to do. We would like to thank Council for the work done improving household access to recycling. We ask that DCC builds on this work by making it as easy as possible for us and other businesses to divert from landfill by providing accessible, affordable city centre facilities for businesses to pass their recycling to. In my experience, community, council and business initiatives can work well together in addressing problems. Dunedin's domestic recycling is a good case in point. DCC's domestic curbside collection tackles the big volume items of household waste. Community initiatives collect bottle tops, Tetra Paks and more, and businesses with an interest take care of light bulbs and batteries, etc. Each addresses the DCC's goal of reducing solid waste to landfill. As a city centre business, dealing with the basics rests with us. Even where infrastructure exists, the bureaucracy creates barriers. 25 organisations operate from the building we share. In order to participate in cardboard recycling, each one has to register with DCC independently and carry their cardboard to a car park under the library. It's much easier to get a red bin and not worry about it. Point 4. Making recycling the easiest option for city centre businesses will help DCC. This means collection points accessible to all, open at times that suit businesses, and collecting as wide a range of items as DCC handle. And point 5. Working with community helps everyone. Expanding those collection points to include items recycled by community groups would show DCC's recognition of the work they do to help Dunedin achieve our shared objective of minimising waste. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Do we have any questions? Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, Rob. Good to see you. So these collection points, are you specifically thinking in town or wherever businesses are? That's part 1. And part 2 would be, how many of them would you envisage?
As many as possible and as central as possible. The closer they are, the better. And I know that as Dunedin Community House, we supported DCC with their cardboard recycling. We gave the space because we were able to use it. And so I'd encourage us to think as broadly as possible about where we can put these things and what can be put where and who we can work with to do it. Because certainly we'd work with council to make sure that we could tap into a system. So I can't imagine where the big where to put this. So I'd imagine it would be lots of small places.
Mr. Mayor.
I was aware of that recycling centre, if you like, in Moray Place, beside Community House. But are there any recycling centres in the CBD currently? Any other similar setups? It might not be a question for you. But.
Well, there's one under the overbridge. We don't have to renew the waste. I think it's that's the Jetty Street one. I think that's the only 2 Centre City ones.
So the only one Centre City one?
Well, 2. There's one in Moray Place.
Oh, there's still one in Moray Place. That at Community House is still there?
No, the one at bottom. I'm thinking the one at bottom of View Street.
So there are 2.
Right, and my question is going to be basically follow up to that one, which is obviously there's a need for more.
Yes.
My other question would be, have you communicated with the Waste and Environmental Solutions team at all, or would you want this presentation also to go to that team?
I'd like this presentation to go to that team. I am in conversation with them and we're looking at solutions. And I guess the community side of solutions, progress is being made, but we really just need the facilities to let businesses recycle easily. Those are sort of different things. Recycling more and different things versus actually just tapping into DCC systems.
Cool, thanks. So really what you're asking for is infrastructure to support you?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Any more questions? No, thank you very much. And this is a big issue for us, so it's good to have your presentation here today. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Okay, next is Amy Parker, who will be talking about the everlasting issue of the State Highway 1 Waitati speed reduction, and I can attest to how long this has been from what I've seen at the Regional Transport Committee. Amy, the microphone is yours.
Let this be the last conversation.
Let's hope.
All right. At State Highway 1 in Waitati, there is a lot going on. There are cars and a lot of trucks coming from the north and the south. There are cars pulling into and out of Harvey Street in Waitati. There are cars pulling into and out of the general store on the west side of the State Highway. There are cars, trucks and buses pulling into and out of the parking lot on the eastern side. There are people crossing the road on foot or bike to get to the store or the bus stop. There are also some houses and their driveways. And to add to the chaos, there are often trucks parked in the large shoulder to the south side of the store, and that really obscures a lot actually, and for numerous people from different directions. And that's where recently a kid was hit, okay, on that highway. He's okay, but it was really close call. And I've seen many close calls in the decade I've lived out there. So there's many possible solutions to this issue, and I know you've probably talked about many of them yourselves. You know, and it's a safety issue, so I think this really needs to be, it's not just a convenience or what have you, it's a real, like, safety issue. So, you know, we could move the store, we could realign the road, we could do an overpass, maybe that would be cost effective, surely, or an underpass, or we could reinstate the roundabout that was there. But in the meantime, we could just lower the speed limit. 70 k's, please, and we have a petition signed by over 800 people requesting immediate speed limit change. So if you would like personally to understand the situation yourself, go there, spend some time, watch it unfold. There's so many close calls happening all the time. Take your kid, take a baby in a buggy and cross that road. Hold your toddler's hand like their life literally depended on it and cross that road. Let your elderly parent with a walker try and cross that road. You know, it's no joke how dangerous it is. And on that note, I also would like to present on behalf of Stephen Jenkins, who is the father of the child. He's too upset to relive it. Okay. So he says, it was my son who was struck that day on State Highway 1. The estimated speed of the impact was nearly 70 k's, having been able to slow from 100. His name is Elmer Jenkins and he is 14. According to the other children who were present and witnessed this, the first thing Elmer did when he got up off the road was apologise to the driver for breaking their windscreen. Let that sink in. He broke the windscreen and felt bad about it. And then he was taken by ambulance to A&E. His father, he's now talking in second person, his father arrived soon. After Elmer was struck, he could hear the local siren sounding from the fire station and knew it was for his son. He was distraught, of course. The father, he said that receiving the news on his doorstep of his child being hit by a car on the highway reached deep inside him in a way he never wishes to experience again. A deep and visceral reaction, and he had to inform Elmer's mother. So on the day, he also made sure that the driver was okay. He understood what this would do to the driver. He had just run down a child. So the father and Elmer have since hosted the driver at their house because the driver couldn't sleep and required counselling. That meeting was very beneficial and the driver is now better too. So there is always a personal story to these situations, not just for Elmer and his family, but the driver who ran over Elmer and the emergency services who must attend these accidents. He asks you to consider the impact on other children who were witness to the accident too. There's a lot of suffering in the community. So the police have been wonderful. His father would like you to know, keeping in contact afterwards to ask how Elmer is. So a community shouldn't have to deal with situations like this for want of a very simple solution to slow the speed limit. It's actually not hard. It's a couple of signs. You don't need to be a parent to understand that once you are one, the quote, you will never not know fear again. It's always there in the back of your head when your children are outside of the house, but you trust community. It's an essential part of life. So what no one ever wants to experience in their lives is that random knock at the door out of the blue with that news. Your son has been hit by a car on the highway. So lower the speed limits, please. We have been warned by this accident that this needs to happen. We know this needs to happen. The corner even has a recommended speed of 65 k's, you know, and that's right there. So that's your evidence. Do you need more before you will act? A death, will that change things? If he had died, would that have changed things? You need to react to this because you're the decision makers, and you represent the community, and you have to make a really obvious choice here. People aren't expected to be hit by a car at 70 k's and survive. That's why we have lowered the speed limits in areas with high concentrations of children and have laws about what speed you can pass a school bus. So lower the speed limit, please. To do nothing is going to be not good enough.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure we've got a few questions here. Councillor Mayhem, I see the Mayor as well.
Thank you, Amy. That was very emotional. I wondered if you knew that one of the local fire volunteers was clipped by a truck just the other day.
I didn't know that, but I'm not at all surprised.
And do you think, I was having this conversation with Councillor O'Malley, do you think a roundabout would be a solution? We used to have a roundabout and it definitely worked at slowing cars down.
Absolutely, and I think there needs to be a more long-term solution in the meantime, because I know something like that big bit of infrastructure like a roundabout would take forever. In the meantime, we can lower the speed limit. We can. Like, I know that this government is putting a stop to speed limit lowering, but if there's actually accidents happening, and honestly, when I've checked what is required for 70 speed limit, it should be happening here. There's like a corner, there's residents, there's it's an intersection, it's a really busy spot. That should be not 100 k's an hour.
Yep.
So your petition, Amy, that's 7 years old. Yep. And did you elevate this historically?
Yeah, so in 2017 I met with the people from NZTA who were doing a Safer Streets thing. They were investigating this dangerous stretch of road between Palmerston and Dunedin, because there's so many accidents that happen along this stretch. And this was one of the hot spots, and so me and some of the community board members got together and met with them. We took them down there, and I started this petition at that time to really get some steam behind it. And they were all very encouraging, and them being there and seeing, they were shocked at how fast, particularly the trucks, absolutely hurtle when you're standing there waiting to cross to get to the store or from the bus. And they were gobsmacked at how dangerous it was, actually. But from that, we had about 300 signatures at the time. And they were doing community consultation, and we got some trees trimmed was the outcome from that, and they have since grown back. And yeah, once this accident happened, I restarted the petition, and it's since gained a lot of traction.
The population of Blueskin Bay is 800, so would you say that the petition has now been signed by everyone in the watershed of Blueskin?
I'd say the vast majority of Blueskin is, if they haven't signed, they're very supportive of this move. And their families, people who know the Jenkins family, these kids were really wanting this to happen. Yeah.
I'm sure that you, like myself, when we found out that it was Alma, and I think every mother in the village thought that could have been my child. Do you have a method that you use for crossing the road or leaving the store? Because I do.
Yep, you've got to have a method, and you have to run. You can't actually walk that safely. And when I started that petition, it was on behalf of the parents of the Blueskin Play Centre. So I was speaking on behalf of. We had signed a letter and sent it to the NZTA, and so at the time I had a little one. So it was a matter of getting your buggy ready, and you look, and you run as fast as you can. Me and my boy now, he's 8, and we we often ride down to the shop and we have to leave our bikes on one side and run on foot, because trying to, the thought of him coming off the bike, you know, and he insisted one day of walking his bike across because it was new and he didn't want to leave it, and the pedal caught on his leg, and a car came round and had to actually change lanes to get around us. It's like this happens all the time. And you go to pull out and you can't see anybody coming, and you pull out and they're right there all of a sudden, and there's, people tooting at you for just trying to get across the road. It's a really stressful intersection. Yeah.
Before I go on to the next people, so you've approached NZTA a number of times and you've still got no outcome from that approach. So my suggestion is that the council takes up this petition and we bring it back to the Regional Transport Committee as a direct request from the community.
Yep.
How do you feel about that approach?
I think that's great. We can start there, and we will continue until it happens.
And one of the issues that we face is that NZTA does not have a method for assessing safety outside deaths and serious injuries. And
they might want to reassess that.
Well, I think so. But that is actually an issue that rolls, because then when you don't have, as you said it, do we have to have a death? And the answer is, in fact, in order to get up the metrics, you do. That's the dark side of the
And that's quite disgusting when you think about it, eh?
It is.
It shouldn't, that should have been a death, actually, to be hit by a car at 70 k's.
So it'd be interesting to see, actually. It's bizarre to say, it'd be interesting to see how they actually cope with assessing what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, my question's changed slightly, and that is in response. What was the response? Response is plural, that you've had back from NZTA. So what reason have they given, or reasons have they given for not lowering the speed limit at 270k? Because it does seem a very clearly obvious, simple and easy intervention to make.
So actually, I think my first contact was around the corner itself, because it has 2 yellow lines, and as you're trying to pull into Waitangi as you're coming out of town, people cross it all the time. I was just talking to my neighbour who said he makes sure to really hug it, to make sure people are staying away. You've got to have strategies in this intersection. But trucks their front will be not crossing over, but their back will always cross those double lines. And so I contacted the council actually 7 years ago about that, and they said they'd look into it and didn't actually see an issue. So I don't know how long they were there for or how many, but it's such an obvious issue. So that was actually someone at the council I talked to. I'm not sure who, I'd have to check my emails. And then the second one was me requesting a speed limit reduction, requesting the council to do something about that. And they said they'd look into it. Crickets. Then this NZTA conversation petered out. It just petered out, and I actually think it got handed over to someone else. And, once new people come on board, it's hard for them to pick up where other people left off, so nothing happened.
So you've had no reason why they haven't reduced it. Thank you.
There is a community member who's requested through the Official Information Act all correspondence on this matter, because as a community we want real clarity as to why we're not seeing anything change.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, and thank you for coming along. And as a parent, I felt sick. My question is the petition available widely? And I'll tell you why. We were driving back last night from Christchurch. My husband was driving. Before we got to Waitangi, I said to him, what is the speed limit going through Waitangi? And he said, at least 70, maybe 60. So when we got there, and it wasn't, I can't repeat what he said, and he said, something should be done about this. People need to really get behind it. And so, is there ability for others to sign this petition? Because I would think if you asked across the city, most people would actually think the speed is at least 70.
Yeah, and there's been some people from the city who've signed it because they know, even just using that road is dangerous, just driving through there. It's change.org. Waitati speed limit reduction. I think it's all in your thing there. Yeah.
It's on the links. Councillor Gary.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Amy, thanks for coming along, and I know it's not easy to relate that. And my reaction was death-defying and accident waiting to happen. I wondered if you had considered, because I've come across this issue before around the accidents and serious injury issue in terms of stats, and you've obviously got a lot of anecdotal information there. Have you thought about logging, making a log of all of the near misses? And I understand you shouldn't have to, but I have seen that be extremely helpful in other situations. I like that idea. Yeah, and my neighbour and myself were talking the other day about actually doing some data collection ourselves. I'm a researcher, I know how to collect data, and even just sitting and counting how many in an hour, how many people cross that double yellow line or something. Yeah, because if we could, it's about proof, right? I mean, I'd love for you to all try and cross it yourself to get a sense of how dangerous it really is. But numbers as well, you know. I'd really encourage you to do that.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. I think we're all aware of the issue around the large area that you're talking about. We're also aware of NZTA's response to hotspots. If you think of the warning signs at the Moeraki turnoff, I'm wondering what's to stop us, apart from the fact that it's illegal for us to do anything on a highway, what's to stop us taking some sort of direct action as a council or as individuals to put up a sign pleading with people to reduce speed on both sides of that intersection. And if NZTA don't like it, they could remove it and put one up themselves. That's a question for you and and the staff.
Maybe we could. I'm actually suggesting I'm going to ask staff to clip this video out and send it to the South Island Relations Manager at NZTA, and we'll start from there. And maybe the threat of breaking the law might come with it. Generally speaking, I found that if you put a sign beside the road on State Highway 1, no one notices, actually. But in all seriousness, I think to get that speed limit reduced, NZTA has to agree to do it, and I'm more than happy to put our weight in behind this now. I think a general agreement around the room that we do that. Councillor Gary.
Just a thought, has the community thought about putting a sign up in each direction?
Most definitely, yeah. But we know that you're not meant to. So
Mark Brown's got a lot of land.
But we...
I wouldn't discount that.
Cool. Okay, any more questions? Then what we'll do is we'll take your petition and we'll give it to the Transport Department and we'll take that to the Regional Transport Committee. I just had a look. The next Regional Transport Committee is November 22nd. Would you be willing to come to public forum and present there?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. No more questions? Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Gilbert.
Further to Councillor Benson-Pope's question, if there is roadworks, whether the roadworks are happening or not, there always has to be a speed reduction sign placed up. I'm merely wondering whether we have any work that needs to be done around that way.
We could repair a pothole just inside the Waitati area.
There is, so that the shoulder that where trucks often park is full of potholes, and actually that's really dangerous when people pull in there. I can't stress that enough. And sometimes the stock trucks will be left there, while they go collect more, and it's obscured, like so obscured you can't see more than 10 metres when people are driving 100. So there's a lot of potholes in that particular shoulder. It would be great if we could somehow prevent.
And I imagine that the team have got quite a lot on their plate, so they may not be able to get to it immediately, but putting the signage up straight away I think would probably be a very clever idea, just to let the community know that it's on its way. Just an idea.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. You'll be happy to know that the video's already been sent up to NZTA. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
No more questions. Then that is the end of public forum. And now, thank you very much, Amy. We're now on to apologies. Ms. Donna Matahari Atariki and Councillor Steve Walker for apologies. And I've offered Councillor Mayhem the opportunity for early departure if she thinks that Leith Saddle might get closed by snow before we have a chance to carry on. So I move that the committee accepts the apologies. All those in favour? Oh, I need a seconder. Councillor Weatherall, all those in favour? Carried. Take it nobody wants to speak to it. It's all right, you arrived, so that's good. Yep. Confirmation of the agenda. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda? If not, then I move that the committee confirms the agenda without additional alteration. Seconder, Councillor Weatherall. All those in favour? Carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any amendments to the members' register of interest? If not, then I move that the committee confirms the proposed management plan for elected or independent members' interests. Second to Councillor Weatherall. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Confirmation of minutes. So we're now on to item 6. Infrastructure Services Committee meeting 18th of June 2024. Are there any questions on those minutes? A couple of councillors asked me about matters for consideration of the chair. Are you happy with the answers you got back? Oh, if there's no questions, then I guess the assumption is yes. Then I move that the committee confirms the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting held on the 18th of June 2024 as the correct record. Seconded, Councillor Wiley. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 7, actions from resolutions of Infrastructure Services Committee meetings. These are pages 25 to 27. Any questions? Councillor Gary?
Yes, Mr Chair, as I indicated to you, I would like some clarity around particular matters. So we have various resolutions here. At the last ISCOM meeting, I believe it was indicated to me that some missing resolutions, and I'm aware of 2, there might have been more, would be on the council agenda. They were not on the council agenda. I asked about that at the council meeting, the same question, and was told and could see the logic in them being on the ISCOM agenda, and I'm referring to the annual plan resolution from last year and the one from this year on the Peninsula Connection, which don't appear. And was told they'd be on this agenda, and that seemed logical because staff would be present, relevant staff would be present to ask questions of. However, they don't appear here either. So I'm wondering whether it's an oversight or could we have some clarity about where they will appear and when. And this is not about the 9-year plan, this is about resolutions that should be somewhere. It might be for Mr McLean.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so in regard to the Peninsula Connection resolutions, some of those resolutions were made in a different meeting, as you mentioned, a council meeting, so they appear on the council forward work program. But I understand talking to Ms Sullivan just now that they may have shifted to council's 9-year plan forward work program. But in regard to your concern about having them tracked, I'm just talking with the governance support officers now about how we can reference active resolutions for that sit in another committee or another meeting at the bottom of perhaps the ISCOM forward work program or the open actions, so that they're not relevant, not sitting in this meeting, but we reference them so that when you see them, they're all sitting in the same place, but it will be something along the lines of refer to council resolution. And in terms of tracking progress against some of them, I'll talk to Ms Benson about putting updates specific to that and some of the preparatory work for the Peninsula Connection that we'd agreed to, putting that as part of the activity report so you can track progress on actual activity.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. You'll appreciate the community is very sensitive about this, given that it dropped between the cracks previously, which is what precipitated the motions and then resolutions. So it's about being able to ask questions as we track towards the 9-year plan. So whatever mechanism I've found, that's fine as long as it's evident in the agendas.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. On page 26, there's mention of a submission for the proposed amendments to the local government mandatory non-financial performance measures. And I guess the good news is it says the DIA made substantial changes in the proposal to address issues raised in submissions, including the issues raised in the DCC submission. But I just wonder about closing the loop and us having the feedback about what actually was changed. Is there, because we do a lot of submissions and we often wonder if anything happened, and I just wonder if there's a process for telling us what the changes were and how that worked.
Yeah, that feedback's noted. Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a good idea. If we are aware of changes to things we've submitted on, we'll capture it there. Yeah, if we've been made aware, or if we've had a response to a submission.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe if it comes in activity or something like that, because I was very curious as to what was changed, because we did have quite a debate on the drinking water safety and on the measures, so it would actually be interesting for all of us that are interested in water to see what's changed, so that then we can have some comfort in what did change and then the things that didn't change as to whether we need to keep lobbying on them.
Say something.
We can definitely follow up and documents and we don't have anything documented already, do we, Jared?
We probably do have like a staff level, but not like a council report. Yeah.
So we can provide something.
Yeah, Three Waters has an activity report due in October, I think, so we could provide an update then if you'd like, or before then.
Yeah, they've got it all. Using it. Cool. That actually does seem quite useful. I mean, we might be able to work out something at just when a submission goes in, just a single summary of its impact, and to arrive back probably to the committee that the submission came from would be the best way. Very good. Any more questions? Councillor Barker? Okay, Councillor Benson-Pope. Got you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the first one, Peninsula again, but in relation to the boardwalk. And there are some of us at the table who remember that decision and discussion and decision in 2022. It seems an extraordinary amount of time for that not to have been actioned. Can you have some explanation, please?
I don't have the answer right now. Ms Benson will be over for the transport activity report. You may wish to raise that at that point, because she will have an understanding of it.
I'll capture it there too. Councillor Gary.
Mr. Chair, I just wondered if you had any idea of how we will learn the result of the RLTP.
This particular item?
It's page 25.
No, I mean, like, what result of the RLTP are you?
Oh, just from the hearings and the deliberations, what the result will be in terms of the Wakatahi money and so forth.
Yes, so we set the RLTP up from our deliberations and hearings, and then we send it to Wellington, and it's in the middle of the National Land Transport Plan being formed now, and I think it comes out in, Mr. Mayor, I think it was about 2 weeks' time, wasn't it? It's quite soon.
And how will that be conveyed to us as a council? If you want to look at the whole National Land Transport Fund, I'm sure we can forward it to you. The transport team goes over it and looks at the impact, so we could potentially look at the impact. Conveyed to us, yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Any more questions? Very good. Then I move that the committee notes the open and completed actions from the resolutions of Infrastructure Services Committee meetings. Seconded by Councillor Mayhem. Anybody wish to speak? I think I will just say one thing, and that is that we do have a lot of competing interests in the city in terms of where we are going and what we have money for, and we're not going to get a hell of a lot of support from central government on this. So what comes out of the NLTF will be quite illustrative of what we have to do, what we have to do our work with, and I think that will then determine a lot of our forward planning. Okay, with that, I put it. Oh, did I have a seconder? Yeah, I did, Councillor Mayhem. Okay, I put it. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 8, Infrastructure Services Committee Forward Work Programme. That's page 31 through 35 in your agenda. Councillor Benson-Pope.
More of the same, even more dated. The last item refers to the Shaping Future Dunedin projects, which were a number of projects dear to Council's heart and were determined in 2021 in 2021. And not much seems to have happened, and updates, while often asked for, have been infrequent. And the park and rides, one example, and the real-time parking management advice, technology, whatever, is another one that I've asked about numerous times. Do I ask this again during the work program, the transport report, or is Mr McLean able to help us with reasons for the delay now?
Thanks, Councillor. So there's a report coming in October on the parking management, so that'll cover off the real-time parking activity. But your feedback is noted, and I'll talk to the team about bringing a report back on progress on all of the Shaping Future Dunedin programs.
Thank you. I noticed the comment about the report, but the report doesn't tell me that any work's going to happen. I mean, the fact that there's a report coming is not, I mean, I know we've seen the invitation for the tenders for the gantries for signage. I don't know if any have been accepted or if they were a reasonable cost or whatever, and I have no idea what, if anything, is actually happening. It just seems that given that we have the Cagney report telling us there's an issue around people knowing where parking is, and we have a number of parking buildings that have capacity, the obvious answer is let's make sure drivers, local and from elsewhere, know where the parking is. And over 3 years ago, we resolved to do that and nothing has happened. I'm sorry.
Is that a question?
Yes, why not?
So I can assure you work has been happening, and you'll be updated in October on the procurement process and the next steps.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Mine's a follow-up question from Councillor Benson-Pope, and specifically about the Mosgiel Park and Ride, because my understanding is that the land has been purchased and work had already been started on it, and also the express bus had commenced. So I'm just wondering why it now says it will be considered as part of the 9-year plan when I thought work was underway. So I'm just wanting to know why suddenly it's not being finished.
Thanks, Councillor. So the work that was underway is there's a lot of consenting required. That work's fairly complete, as I understand it, and then the capital required will be considered as part of the 9-year plan.
I thought the site pretty much was very little capital required because the site's gravelled. I mean, it's not great surface, but it could pretty much start as a park and ride very quickly. I had thought that, but there must be other issues that are not obvious to.
Well, one is that if we don't come out on Gordon Road, then we have to put a bridge over the Whiro.
Oh, okay.
To come out on the side, and that because I don't think we can come out on Gordon Road from that entrance right now and not completely paralyse that intersection.
Correct, true. And my other question is in relation to George Street. I thought we were getting a completion report that had, how we went to budget, the whole, a wrap-up report, and I don't see that featuring on here, and it's not on the agenda either. I'm just wondering where that's at.
So that's, the drafting of that has almost been completed, so it'll probably come to the next council meeting. Yep.
Any more questions? Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Page 32, public toilets. Just wondered if there's any update on the Changing Places toilet. I didn't see it mentioned there. Forgive me if I've overlooked it.
No, unfortunately, Mr. West is unwell today. I did get a message off him this morning that said if any toilet questions come up, he will respond from his man flu bed.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Just following up on the toilets, I think maybe he's listening. I'm aware that we have a toilet matrix, and I see that there's a report for property coming up next ISCOM, but people have been coming and asking about toilets, so I wondered if the toilet matrix if the information on what we were doing is publicly available. And I also wanted to follow up on that changing places toilet as well, because people have an expectation from our LTP that we're doing this work.
Yeah, I can follow up with Ms. Nielsen on the matrix, and it might be something that she might be able to email around or bring in October. So.
And my next question is around the Centre City Plan, and it says we've got a business case development for future stages, and it says it's coming to September. Does that mean that it's coming to council? It's got update report in September on the forward work programme.
I'll check. There is an ISCOM, I think, on the 17th of September, so I'll check. It may be coming to that.
Thank you. When we do the report on the toilet matrix, can we actually just have a table to come with the agenda, so that way it's publicly available? It's easy for people to find at that point.
Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor Gary.
And on toilets again, I noted the videos on the Outram Glen toilet and then the Frederick Street toilet. It was fascinating. Is there a plan to continue those little video clips? Because I think they are very impactful, actually, and full credit to the staff member who took those. But is that planned to continue?
Yeah, I'll find out from Ms. Nielsen, but I know that they've been fairly popular. So.
Any more questions? Councillor Houlihan.
I add St Leonard's to that list too, please.
If it's on the matrix list, then it should be on the matrix list. Yeah, cool. And I think it will be quite relevant for people to know where their project sits, in terms of delivery dates. Any more questions? Okay, without that, then I'll move that the committee notes the Infrastructure Service Committee Forward Work Programme. Seconded Councillor Weatherall. Anybody wish to speak to it? I'm just going to briefly speak to Councillor Benson Pope's questions about the parking signage. I know that work is coming forward, so it'll be coming when it comes. I mean, we have as much staff as we can put on the transport projects that are sitting out there, and I believe they are moving them all forward as fast as they can. And I think that when we look at the delivery of that team, we have to look at the size of that team and the ability to be able to deliver. My main issue is always making sure something doesn't drop and make sure it is moving forward, but I do believe it's actually coming quite close to being presentable to the council in terms of a plan. Any more speakers? Otherwise, I will then move. Put it. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9, part of reports, Three Waters Infrastructure, Integrated Systems Planning. And I believe we have Mr. McAndrew and Mr. Oliver.
Kia ora, councillors. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
We will take it as read and happy to take any questions.
Questions? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I was just reading on page 39, paragraph 13, and it talks about the program board for the ISP program, and I just wondered who are the members of the board and at what level? Is it governance level or is it operational level?
Thank you, Councillor. The membership includes one of the Runaka members from Keiti Hurapa ki Pukitirangi, that's Brendan Flack, and then the other two members are from the Ōkaha team, that's Kate Timsteen, the manager for the Manataiao team at Ōkaha, and Alex Gorry, who's part of her team.
I'll ask a little bit better. Who else is on the program board? So I'm just wanting to understand: is it the the DCC, the ORC, like who are the partners, and then are they represented at a governance level or an operational level?
Sorry, Councillor. So the other members are DCC staff members. We have Dave Ward as our project sponsor, and myself as the executive, and then senior managers in terms of senior user and supplier and so on. And so they have a governance role in terms of steering the program, the ISP program itself.
But no council governance from this committee at all, right?
That's correct.
Thank you. And the other aspect, following up again from Councillor Barker's question, we have Ms. Matahari Atariki here as the rep on the Infrastructure Committee, and Ms. McDonald as the Puketeraki rep on the Infrastructure Committee. I know that this was made up a while ago, but what is the thought, or what a role, how will the representatives on the Infrastructure Committee, given that Three Waters sits in infrastructure, how can they play a role in terms of the mana whenua representation, and has there been a clear direction back from mana whenua as to is every base being covered by representation here?
We're happy to take any direction that either the committee or mana whenua would give us in terms of that role, but for the time being, the Aukaha team and the Runaka from Puketeraki haven't indicated that they want any changes to the representation and the governance for the program. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. I think this might be, if we can capture this, something for Te Pai Māori to discuss in terms of correct representation, make sure that our representation is well aligned. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was reading this report, what struck me was there was no mention around non-potable water being used for grey water, being used for example, flushing toilets in new builds. Something that's been done in Australia, and also water tanks on new builds in various places, be it rural or semi-rural or lifestyle blocks or whatever, where people are on the reticulated scheme. I'm not talking about domestic self-suppliers here, but has any thought been given to that? Because that then relieves the pressure, and I see the concern around water supply and storage and capacity and all of that, but there's no discussion in there whatsoever about that option.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so that option has been considered as part of the work. So in the third stage, the strategic responses, there were over, I think, around about 200 responses were considered, and so in the stormwater and water supply space, that was considered. And so when we looked at it compared to our guiding principles, we just felt that it wasn't the strongest option compared to other options, but the way our adaptive planning works is that while it won't be part of our core pathway, as things move forward in the future, that may change. I think from memory, the key things which made it more challenging were some of the safety aspects around using that water for and integration with household plumbing and so on. But yeah, like I say, just compared to other options, it didn't stack up so favourably.
And yet in Australia, it's mandated in some states.
That's the Australian context. In New Zealand, it wasn't the case. We think that we can make a lot of improvements in terms of the efficiency of our water supply and using the existing resources we have more wisely before we need to resort to those kinds of measures.
Of course, we do have something like that in terms of water supply storage tanks for restrictive valves. We do have that already in restricted areas like Waitati, right?
Yes, that's correct. Waitati's on a restricted scheme.
And the houses have a holding tank.
Yes, so they're supplied potable water from the town supply, but in a restricted way. I understand Councillor Gary's question was more about using alternative water sources to supplement for non-potable purposes. Is that?
Both.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Reading through this, I thought, I wondered the fact that we voted for a high level of spend for infrastructure, do you see that covering, you know, I was trying to see if, like, for example, Tahuna needs to be done and some of those other things that are quite large projects, we, even with a high spend, will need more. Is that, do you think? I mean, I suppose you always need more, but it's an endless thing. But where do you see us going with that? Like, how far do you think we can get with a high level of spend that we've already committed to?
I think that'll be seen in the 9-year plan will come through, but certainly, you know, there's that recognition we need to spend more. There's more around in the regulatory environment, higher standards to meet, and so that's been factored into this work. So it's, you know, it's hopeful that the higher increase of spend will be sufficient, but the numbers that come through in the 9-year plan will talk to that.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And so capacity, because that is quite alarming. I mean, it's really good to have this because we sort of have a better picture of where we're sitting, but what would you say out of this is the most alarming for you? You may not want to answer that, but if you're able to, is there anything? I thought the capacity was quite an issue, but how do you, like, are there lots of cities that have the same problem, or is that quite, you know, we quite vulnerable?
I guess one thing that's common in a lot of places and wasn't a huge surprise for us is that the wastewater network and its poor performance in wet weather, and that is typical of a lot of cities and particularly older cities like Dunedin. Probably one thing that was quite surprising was the water supply situation in the future, and so we heard from the ORC that the Taieri, where our main sources of water come from, that catchment is something like 6 times over allocated, and so they've indicated that we're very unlikely to get that water in the future, and so that's something that we hadn't anticipated, and so now we're putting the plan in place to work towards that. We've got some time, and we think we can pivot to address that issue, but yeah.
Issue as well as an issue too, isn't it? Like, we're not able to disperse water into streams or anything now, as well as limits on that. So how it sort of mentions there, but that creates, we need new structures for that as well, I assume.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. We have existing constructed wastewater overflows which allow us to discharge into the environment in these wet weather conditions. Those consents expire, I think, around the mid-2030s from memory. However, the Otago Regional Council will be releasing its land and water regional plan later this year, and we're anticipating that will effectively raise the bar, lift the requirements around the performance of our networks, and limit or constrain our ability to do that in the future. Yeah.
I've just got one other question before we move on to the rest of the questions. There's a few lined up now. To water supply, I mean, the other issue isn't just that the OIC may change our intake rates, but also that the lamellors themselves look like they're drying out, and that NIWA has forecasted that will be the continuing change in this area, that the area will start getting drier and drier. We have issues in the Waikawaiti River. So when are we going to talk about an additional abstraction point, and how long does it take for the designation process to occur? So based on when we need it, when do we, I'm suspecting the answer is now, but when do we need to start the designation process?
So as part of our implementation plan, the first thing we need to do is some investigations to figure out where are the likely places we can find sufficient groundwater and start doing some test bores and so on. So we want to get underway with that work very soon. I'm not sure as yet how long the designation process will take, but that's all part of getting underway with the implementation plan.
A bore will be much less than a dam, but obviously, so that I think we do need to get on top of that and figure out when. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on page 41, which is paragraph 17, and it talks about updating the three water strategy was outside the scope of the ISP. And I note that the strategy is from 2011. So and I can't see it in there's the next step. So I'm just wondering how this is going to align with, I mean, you need your strategy first, I guess. So is there a plan to put the three water strategy update on the work plan?
As yet, it's not on the work plan. With the uncertainty around the Three Waters reform, we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern there, but hopefully when we get some certainty, we can get that onto the work program.
Can I ask what the uncertainty is, in as much as you've got the identifiable issues right here, wherever that delivery model goes, they'll still be the same ones. So is not knowing the delivery model the reason that we're not moving on things, or?
Our concerns around moving with updating the Three Waters strategy are more to do with the process that we would take. So the original strategy was done with broad public engagement, and we feel that we would need to do that again, and just our feeling is that with all the uncertainty in the moment, it's perhaps not a great time to engage with the public on an update to a Three Waters strategy.
Well, we should have certainty by the end of the year, so I assume that once that's done, we'll be away. Cool, thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Sorry, I haven't finished.
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Well, would it be possible to add the Three Water strategy to the forward work program so it sits somewhere and that there's attention being paid for it? I guess my next question, and this is relating back to the governance of the program, sort of that governance versus operational question. I note that on page 41 there's a bunch of guiding principles which were developed. And when we had guiding principles previously for zero carbon, they were actually adopted by council. So I'm just wondering if it's possible to look at the process around where does governance sit. And I think that Councillor O'Malley has asked that because we've got Mana Whenua on this committee, and then about adoption of guiding principles that they're agreed to by the governance, which is the council. So perhaps would it be possible for you just to look at that process? Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I want to basically look at, on page 40, paragraph, what was it, 15.5, where it talks about the Musselburgh wastewater pump station pipelines from there to Tahuna wastewater treatment plant. And I'm very aware of, there's a major issue going into Tahuna Intermediate and through that through their field. Is that in the short-term fix plan, or is it more a longer-term fix? Because I understand everybody aware of it is wondering when and where it's going to blow.
There's a number of projects related to Musselburgh, to the pump station and to the pipelines. We have undertaken some short-term work and are looking at further short-term measures. However, the big picture solution is definitely a significant investment and a longer-term project, which we have completed a lot of work on in terms of assessing options already, and will be something that appears in the 9-year plan. So the combination of short-term fixes, but the long-term fix is a significant project.
And is the dialogue continuing with Tahuna Intermediate around that, and are they comfortable with that and their children playing on that field?
I know from time to time as operational issues come up, there is dialogue with the school, but we should definitely review and revisit the communication in terms of the longer term process.
Yep, thank you for that. The way I'm reading this paper, it's very much focused on the 9 years with a guiding pathway to 50 years. The one thing, though, I'm not seeing as much as I would like to see is enough thinking. There's very much current thinking around the 9 years about what we have status quo. And I'm struggling to see where the technologies that are being used around the world are being incorporated into our future technologies, you know, even in the next 9 years, because I understand how much the industry is changing in this area. We're not the only city of our side of magnitude grappling with these problems. But I don't see us pushing the boat out or any vision in this next 9 years. Can you respond to that, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So, as part of the responses that were considered, there was a broad range there, including some more at the cutting edge end of technology. And so, although it's not specifically detailed in the report, those things have been considered. And where we've landed is generally trying to push the boat out, but with technology, I guess, that has been kind of adopted rather than taking too many risks. So, for example, we know we need to improve the monitoring in our wastewater and stormwater networks, so we want to go down a route of having smart networks and instrumentation, and that can potentially incorporate the use of AI. In terms of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades that we'll need to do, we'll be looking to incorporate newer technologies, lower processes that have lower carbon footprints and so on. But at this stage, say, steering clear of some technologies which, when we looked at them, we felt that there perhaps weren't examples in New Zealand yet that we could look to say that this is really going to work for us. And in some cases, as well, as a matter of, and some of those technologies work well at larger scales, but as yet haven't been scaled to Dunedin size. So it's the way that works is it'll be a watching brief, and so when opportunities come up to and some of these technologies mature, then we can incorporate them as we move along the pathway.
Okay, I'll use my debate to discuss some of that. The elephant in the room that I couldn't see in this report anywhere, water meters. I would be thinking within the next 9 years, easily, we will be incorporating water meters to actually meet some of the requirements that we would want to achieve in the next 9 years.
Yes, so in the response in terms of water supply and our need for improving our efficiency, that's definitely something that we would like to progress. However, what we do also recognise is that there's potentially a lot of opposition from the community around water metering. So what we'd like to do first is improve the monitoring, and so we can quantify how much water we're losing better. So that's focusing on our leakage and kind of metering of whole districts and suburbs first. And then progressing and building a case, building a strong evidence base so that we can engage with the public and move towards potentially metering of customers. Yeah.
Let's jump in there with another question. Scottish Water was put up as the model that we were all going to follow. It's my recollection that they just do bulk metering and they don't do residential metering in Scotland. Is that correct?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure the answer to that.
It's a rhetorical question. Because I asked them specifically that question when they were doing the development. And in addition to water meters, there are other methods for doing controlling consumption as well, such as restrictors and dose valves, right? So if we were to do that, if we were to head down that direction, you would be coming to council for direction early on in the process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We recognise the significance of a decision like that, and that would be coming back to council.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the dynamic adaptive planning pathways approach, I wondered if there was any discussion or involvement around the psychology of behaviour change, and I want to give you some context before you answer. So I'm a domestic self-supplier, and as such, very aware of how much water I have. I'm checking my water tanks daily, the indicator to see how much water we have. Obviously this time of year it's great, they're full. But you become much more aware of what you're using, as opposed to if you're on reticulated, you turn on the tap and you really don't have a care in the world. So there is a psychology involved with that. And so going back to my last question, the example of tanks for example, coming off the guttering for watering the garden or cleaning the car or whatever, which is often the first thing we do in terms of restrictions. Any thought in that approach around the psychology of behaviour change?
Not specifically. I guess where we were at when we considered the different responses was probably where are people's mindset right now, and that some changes might be gradual, and we recognise that people's perceptions change as things move, but it wasn't something that we paid a specific focus to, Councillor. Yeah.
Subsequent question, do you not think with climate change and drought and so forth that this will be part of the future as we move forward in people's thinking?
It may well be, but like I said earlier, just at the moment it's we think there's some stronger options out there.
Radich.
Thank you. Back to water supply. And the idea of no surface water take periods, does that apply to, we've got a range of dams and reservoirs all around the motu, would that apply to water that we have stored in those facilities?
Mr. Chair, yes, it would. So the dams we do have, they do have some storage, but just not sufficient for what we expect those no-take periods to be in the future. So the idea would be we potentially add additional raw water storage, and so we can take that water from the rivers when they're not in low flow conditions, and then when they're in low flow, we stop taking from them, but we take from these dams.
In other words, we just need more storage. Right, but we can't access, because I'm just trying to get absolute clarity on no surface water, because, a lot of our stored water is on the surface, of the planet, but it does belong to us. We can use it.
That's correct. Sorry, yeah. The water in our dams, we still have access to. It's the restrictions on taking more water from the river at certain times of the year. Yeah.
Councillor Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following on from a question earlier around digging bores and things, do we know if we've got aquifers and what sort of, supply they've got, what type of quantity of water there is in them if we've got them? And why haven't we, if we've got if we've got them, why have we preferred to use the surface instead of that, I suppose it means now we've got them, but
we have some groundwater bores located in Mosgiel, although we took the decision to stop using them around 2017, just due to water quality concerns. And then the work that was been done in the ISP program at this stage has been desktop based, and also talking to the Otago Regional Council and finding out from them about what information they have on groundwater. So we have some understanding of where it will be located, but the next stage as part of the implementation is to take that further and look at that in more detail and potentially do pilot bores and so on. Yep.
We do
Microphone.
Had it on. We can see what's underneath the ground and determine how much water is that would be the next stage, would it, that sort of thing?
Potentially, yeah. I'm not a hydrology expert, so I'm not sure the methods, but yeah, it could be something like that potentially. Yeah.
My other question is around the group. Councillor Barker was asking some very good questions around that. Following on from that, just wondering, say for example, that group, I'm just wondering what role they play. Like, do you see them making decisions on what we do with some of our water? And if so, where does that sit with this committee? You know what I mean, in the governance arm? Like, say for example, we voted for a certain thing to happen in infrastructure, but then that group didn't agree with it. Can they overturn our decisions? Or how do you see us working together with that group?
So at the moment, like this group would have the absolute power, and so that group is more about governing the program itself, and so things that get decided at that group would always come up to this level for decisions. But as Councillor Barker indicated, we need to go away and think about how the interaction between the two groups in future going forward. So we'll do that.
And it was raised before about our two mana whenua reps. Seems to me, it seems unusual that the two reps who are on this committee wouldn't sit on that one, you know. So we've got two lots. They're getting the information here, but not able to use it in that group. That's what I thought the purpose of them being in here would have been, but I just question that.
Yeah, so I think possibly it's due to us setting up our governance board prior to those members being on the committee and us not having gone back and then reconciled and worked out how the communication will work between the two. So that's a fault on our part, and I'll acknowledge that. Yep.
One more question. There's mention in here of quite a bit of leakage from some of the pipes. And there's also mention of lead in some of the pipes. I've had a couple of people approach me saying that when they were doing a bit of work, they noticed there was some lead pipes they had in North Dunedin. And I just wondered, do we know to what extent we have that around our city? And with the leakage, you know, I know that naturally can happen a bit, but what obviously it means they're old, they're wearing down. What sort of percentage of a problem do you think we've got there? And is it, you know, are you confident it's fixable?
Sorry, Councillor, just wanted to check in terms of the lead. With the example you gave, was that on someone's property or in the network? Yeah. So in terms of people's properties, we don't have a good understanding of the amount of lead pipe that's on each person's property. Yeah, so I couldn't answer that one, unfortunately. In terms of the wider network, yeah, so one of the issues is we have a general understanding of the leakage of our network, but not in a great level of detail, and so that's one of the first actions that we want to do as part of our water supply actions is to set up what we called district metered areas, so we can get a better handle on which parts of the city are more leaky or not, and then from there we can start to address those. So we're confident that through that we can then be quite targeted in terms of which pipes we need to renew and replace and get that leakage down.
The pipes in domestic are usually galvanised iron, the old ones, aren't they? It's lead in the joint, is it? I don't think the pipe itself is lead, is it?
My understanding is historically in some of the distribution mains there was less lead jointing, and lead jointing has been...
Yeah, it's lead jointing though, isn't it? Yeah.
I understand also historically there may have been lead in some customer supply lines, but going back many, many years, and my understanding is there have been programmes in the past to remove that, so anything left would be...
And it still sits on the owner's property
on the
anyway?
Yeah, on the customer side. And certainly if anyone did have any lead piping in their supply on their property, they should look to replace it.
Cool, thanks. Councillor Van der Vis.
The report mentions alternative sources. Do these include really deep bores? And do they include the new high-tech membranes that are available for desalination now? A lot of overseas countries have found that being able to desalinate is actually cheaper than being able to run a lot of conventional systems.
Yes, Councillor. In terms of desalination, that was considered, as was reuse or recycling of water. In terms of the depths of bore, it hasn't been specified as yet, and that's what part of the investigations will figure out. Yeah, so so at the moment the response around potentially groundwater looks more favourable than desalination from a cost and energy perspective, but it's still what we call, it's in our alternative pathways, so it's still there as we may potentially need it in the future, but the priority is to look for groundwater first.
And if we don't see any significant increase in population and we continue to see businesses move away like cotton soft, etc., do you anticipate that we aren't really going to need significant extra water in the coming decade?
I guess that's the hope, that with the focus for water supply in the next 10 years more around efficiency, is that if we can be more efficient with the water, that reduces the amount of upgrades and new infrastructure that we would need for more capacity.
But in terms of general ability to supply, we have had water notices last summer, and I think, did we get them the summer before as well? So we're getting them starting to become summer on summer. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Around wastewater and wastewater constraints around the city, you mentioned the main interceptor. It doesn't look like you're doing a condition assessment on it, but is the actual size of that interceptor part of the constraint issue?
It seems to be in terms of investigations so far, but again, if we can remove more of that I&I, the wet weather performance, if we can improve the wet weather performance of the network, then potentially the size is adequate. So in dry weather, we don't have issues with the main interceptor sewer. It's just when we get the wet weather and all this additional water getting into the network that causes problems.
In the modelling, and I'm going to head on to the future development strategy and see where it sits here. In the modelling of development in the North End, there is already, well, basically there are consents not being granted because of the infrastructure constraints. If those were to be consented, then how much of the dry capacity of the interceptor would now be being run? I guess my question's going to, there's obviously two issues here. I&I, infiltration and inundation for anybody else in the room, is one issue, and that's the reflection of the old system. But we've got growth constraints running across the city now too, which came up in the future development strategy. And so I'm looking at that interceptor going, what would the population growth required be in the centre of town before, in fact, even in dry weather, that would be underperforming? Do you have any idea of that?
I know we've modelled it. I just can't think of the answers right now. I think there are sections of it that would be constrained, and so that's where we'd have to look at either upgrading or having a second pipe, or potentially network storage as different things that we could do to manage that.
Do you have a rough idea of the delivery time on that analysis?
Not as yet. So the next stage and looking at those different options is part of the ISP implementation plan.
Water courses. I noticed that you said that the number of water courses that are in private use is even higher than I thought it was, because I always thought it was near 50, and you've got it up in the 70s, I believe, right? Just trying to find it. What are we doing about the fact? It seems to me that in terms of the biggest issue we're facing in terms of our three waters is actually the private stormwater issues, because they're not really what I would call private stormwaters. They're not people doing their own thing and putting it into the system. They have a stormwater main running through the back of their property. Where are we on the process of looking at that?
So we have a project underway at the moment which will bring a paper to council around the watercourses and the different options in terms of how we manage this issue going forward, and those options might range from council taking them over, or some kind of arrangement where maybe we operate and maintain, or versus the status quo, and various degrees between those.
Okay, thanks. And then I'm just going to finish with, it was 70% I said there now. Is it fair to say, in general summary of this report, that we are doing fairly well with where we are at the moment in the existing Three Waters space, but going into the future, we've got growth issues and constraint issues that we have to face, and with almost definitely with climate change, our current method of getting potable water, relying it on basically coming out of the lamellars, is not going to be able to meet our needs at some point in the future. So we're now starting to work towards what we're going to do, right? We're not at the point of panic yet, I guess is what I'm getting at.
That's correct, yeah, and that's the purpose of this plan, that we identify those issues now and nice and early, and then we work towards addressing them in a timely manner with the right combination of responses.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I can kind of follow up with that in terms of next steps that you've got outlined on page 43, and I'm just trying to work out how this work dovetails in with a 9-year plan and consultation. And you talk about consultation, will it be separate consultation, or will it be part of maybe the engagement? I'm just trying to think, because I'm worried about, we don't want to, consultation fatigue, and obviously this is an area that's, very topical, so I'm just wondering how you're going to progress this.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we recognise that potential for consultation fatigue, and so the intent was just for this to be part of general consultation on the 9-year plan. So there'll be more detail around the ISP program and the future responses in the infrastructure strategy part of the 9-year plan.
Councillor Wiley.
Just following up on a couple of the questions that Councillor O'Malley asked. When we look at our growing city and infrastructure, are developers given a clear pathway on being able to basically develop areas and also put in the appropriate infrastructure so developments can happen speedily, effectively, and also for the best for the city and its current infrastructure, and that means like holding tanks and retention tanks and things like that?
I think that's probably a work in progress, Councillor. At the moment, there is still some grey for developers in terms of giving them certainty and direction, and I guess it's something that we recognise in the teams in Three Waters, and I think other parts of council are trying to make improvements there to make it clearer.
So is what I'm gathering is that it seems to be quite an inconsistency around stormwater management plans at the moment and things like that, rather than finding a consistent formula. And I understand the purpose of that, but actually being able to hold, and again it feeds into our whole future development, if developers have confidence in being able to do projects and actually work with Three Waters to ensure that they meet the future needs and even current infrastructure requirements, how that all works together?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is that we've lifted our requirements for development around stormwater management in the last few years, and that's in line with the regulatory environment that we're in and that we're foreseeing, and so I think the developers are also having to adjust to that too, and so that's kind of creating a bit of uncertainty between ourselves and developers, and also in respect of when it comes to the scale of development and some of the requirements that we have for smaller developments as opposed to larger one, and so that is creating some challenges between the parties, but it's something that we're working on.
Following up from that, because I know where that's coming from. Stormwater overlays and in terms of scale and stuff, but it is fair to say one of the approaches to this is that water doesn't really care who's doing the development. So if you have a catchment where stormwater is moving, it's our policy, is it not, that basically we have to take attention to the whole catchment, even where that development is, and it can't sit independently to it. And is that the major switch that's occurred in stormwater, do you think?
I think the big switch is where historically it was about getting the water off of your site as quickly as you can and into a pipe somewhere and out to the coast. Now the philosophy has kind of shifted to a more managing effects on site and ensuring that the flows post-development, peak flows are no greater than pre-development in the undeveloped land. And so that means some more infrastructure on development sites, and I guess the way that philosophy is achieved is often different between a large development that has more land to do more infrastructure versus a small, 2 or 3 lot subdivision. And so I think some of the challenges for developers has been what information that they need to provide as someone who's doing a 2 or 3 lot subdivision versus a large subdivision, and that's probably where some of the tension has been.
Don't want to get into too long a debate, but also potentially a good place for a retaining pond, maybe half of somebody's small development, right? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we do some, like we're going to do some research, see what we can find in aquifers, if we discover that the quality of that water is not good or the quantity is not enough, where do we go to from there if our surface ponds are not going to be enough?
So that's I guess the beauty of the dynamic adaptive pathways approach. So we'll look at that, and so one option might be upgrading our treatment processes so that we could still treat that water even if it's not as good as we hoped, or it could potentially be deciding, okay, well, groundwater is just not going to work for us. Maybe we need to look at something like desalination, or potentially even recycling of water. So, but yeah, for now we hope that we'll find some groundwater.
It looks to be the end of questions. Any more questions? Very good then. I would put it that the committee notes the Three Waters Integrated Systems Planning Report. Seconded. Councillor Weatherall. Anybody wish to speak to it? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and huge thanks to the staff for the work done on this. And I can see the logic in the approach that you've taken. However, I do believe we're missing a trick here. In a time as we look towards climate change and drought and storm, but particularly thinking of the drought, and we know we have capacity issues and storage issues, I believe that the way that we think about water as residents, the way that we use water and conserve water, and the behaviour changes required have to be part of our planning. And if you ask any of the 20,000 domestic self-suppliers in this city, I believe they would understand that. That simple approach of using grey water, and I became aware of how much water, and we're going back to toilets again, how much water that we use flushing a toilet, even on the half flush, is quite extraordinary in terms of water capacity. And you certainly use that when your tank's getting, you certainly are aware of that when your tank's getting low. And just that simple approach, there are plumbing solutions to that and something we could facilitate. And also that thought about a tank for water in the garden, cleaning the car, for non-potable use. Obviously, if you go to tanks for potable use of water or a potable water supply, that's another whole realm and requires significant investment and regulation. So I believe there's some simple aspects that just help us to tune into the way we use water. As a population, it's something we're going to, as a community, have to think about as we go through and climate change ramps up, that change of attitude. I also want to just touch on the stormwater issue and the public-private stormwater issues that we've traversed over time. They are particularly concerning for those who are in the middle of it and have stormwater issues on their property. That, as has been said, are not of their making. They just happen to have a very large pipe or a significant stormwater pipe going through their property. And we have dealt with that in that we had a list, and the list keeps getting added to, but it has taken us a lot of time to address this. It is not a small issue, I appreciate. It is something we are going to have to address in some way or another. And not kick the can down the road. And I appreciate the work staff have done on it to date.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. As someone that grew up with tadpoles coming out of the tap, I think that town water is an absolute miracle. The report certainly made sobering reading, and there's lots of work to be done. So this is a really vital document when you look at the words like vulnerable water supply, wastewater overflows, ageing pipes, the issues with the main interceptor sewer, and words like highly vulnerable to failure and contaminated stormwater. It does make you worry, and I think that we're going to have some very big numbers to deal with to fix this. We've been talking about water for a long number of years, so I really appreciate that this work's being done, and I also appreciate that some of that capital expenditure will result in, there was the lovely words, operational saving. So I do think we need to be mindful of that, and also I appreciate that we're going to end up with a robust and evidence-based plan, because we absolutely need to have a really good record of all of these resources that we've got and what we need to do about them, and we need to face up to that. And all of the people who use water in the city should appreciate the miracle of turning on the tap and tadpoles not coming out. I did ask a number of questions about the governance and operations, because this is a really important plan and needs that oversight. So I did ask the questions about the program board and where that sits out as a governance role. It says throughout the report that this is a strategic planning program, and it's our role as governance to set that strategy and also to set the guiding principles, which we did when we adopted the working principles to guide the plan development for zero carbon back in February 2024. So I've mentioned the strategies from 2011, and I just think we just need to get that stuff lined up as well. We are dealing with a whole lot of moving parts, including the 9-year plan, etc. So it would be, it's great that staff taking that on board, and we'll go back and look at how we line everything up. We've also got the future development strategy sitting in there. So I guess I'm a picture person, so I like to see the big picture and how we as governance are going to have that input, especially into things like the working principles and the that strategic level as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, and I agree. The report was quite sobering in a lot of ways. Dunedin does need to be aware of the water, where it comes from, how we use it, how we discharge it, and how it flows around our communities. Water is a valuable asset, and for our city and our residents, there are many issues for us all in the short-term and 50-year long-term vision. This paper was very much about setting up our 9-year plan and budgets, plus understanding the core pathway of strategic investments required over a 50-year timeframe for water supply, wastewater and stormwater services. But we do need to take a smarter approach to our 3 waters. This is through using the Internet of Things, AI and sensors and real-time monitoring to help us with optimised water usage, reduce water and further ensure the safety of drinking water. So yes, I believe that water meters will be a part of our future and will potentially be more beneficial than negative for our community. And trust me, I've stood on a couple stages and actually decried the importance of water meters in previous election campaigns. But as we look through what we're facing, I think the time is going to come for these in the next 9 years. We do need to ensure, though, we can grow as a city and our developers have a clear pathway to build more houses and for businesses to move to our city. They need to have the ability to create win-win solutions and work with our 3 waters team for great success. We do need to get on and allow more people to move here because we do have a wonderful city. The research I have done shows that the future of 3 waters technology for small cities is likely to be shaped by a combination of technological innovation, sustainable practices and active community involvement. By leveraging these trends, a city like Dunedin and some of our smaller communities can enhance their water management systems, be more efficient, resilient and environmentally friendly. I think all in all, we do have a strong future with our water. It's a case where we just have to be smarter with it.
Councillor Wetherell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thankfully, this council has continued to take a proactive instead of a reactive approach to delivering water services to our community. Balancing the maintenance of our ageing water infrastructure and the need to supply water services for growth is always a challenging task. As our city storms towards our debt limits, I look forward to government facilitating the separation of our water debt to the debt we continue to accrue in the day-to-day running of our city. What is abundantly clear is that the true costs of water services to Dunedin residences has been subsidised by debt for far too long, and the day of reckoning is fast approaching, which unfortunately is going to be a hard pill to swallow for us all. On the bright side, going forward, we can be proud to live in a city with great water infrastructure assets, unlike some of our neighbours. Every dollar we spend on our water services is for our benefit, instead of paying for the regions who have neglected to keep up with their required maintenance. We have done the hard yards, and now we have to commit to maintaining our Three Waters assets going forward. It's comforting to know we will again be masters of our own destiny. Thank you.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with all the previous speakers that this report was pretty alarming. Actually, I was reading it thinking, oh, goodness me. I mean, we knew we needed work on our infrastructure, but what we're missing was this. So I am absolutely delighted we've got this report. While I don't like really anything that's in it, I like the fact we've got it, because once if you've got a problem, the best way to solve it is to admit it and then work on a strategy to fix it. But the only way you can fix it is by knowing what the problem is. And now we've listed down our main issues. Hopefully we can just tick them off, and I think this completely justifies us having a high spend on infrastructure when you see some of the problems we've got here. I've been going around saying our water levels are, our infrastructure services I thought were better than a lot of other cities, and which the truth is they are. So imagine how bad some of the others are. Goodness me. We are looked on by other countries around the world, and they envy the beautiful lakes we have and the water resources we have in New Zealand. And for us to have this issue, it just shows what impact climate change and other things are having on our country as well. However, also it shows long years of neglect and not enough money spent on infrastructure, and also it shows the fact that things like Tahuna just cost so much money to replace that we will need some help for things like that, I think. And this is why, once again, I know it's terrible to say you've got to go for a handout, but we need to be talking to government about these things coming up in the future, because once we do this work, I'm not a water engineer or anything, but it seems to me that once that capacity is resolved, and once we've got a lot better water plants, more modern technology, renewed a lot of these things, we'll have a really good service for many years to come. And that is future-proofing for our city, which I think's beneficial and has to be done. So thank you for this report.
Vandervis.
Councillor Houlihan has highlighted the alarming aspects of this report. Councillor Wiley has said that this report is sobering. A famous drunk once said that water rust pipes and fish make love in it, and didn't want anything to do with it. Councillor Barker has interpreted the background list of issues on page 38 as real reasons to worry. I'd like to go through them. Three Waters issues, a number of challenges, including 1, ageing infrastructure. Infrastructure is always ageing. That's all it ever does. From the day you put it in, all it ever does is age. And if you look at the infrastructure that we have in Dunedin, compare it to any other major city around the country, especially Wellington, we've got very little in the way of problems that way. The second one, environmental impacts with increasing risk of drought, floods, damage. We've been hearing about environmental impacts and increasing problems for a very long time. We were promised after the disastrous floods of 2015 that we would have increasing and worse problems, and they simply haven't happened for a decade now. Another challenge, apparently, according to this list, is growth in parts of Dunedin being constrained by infrastructure capacity. The real challenge for Dunedin is the lack of growth, the fact that we are not looking forward to having anything like the growth that most other cities have, and that with this lack of growth we have a lack of vitality and a lack of development in the city. The fourth challenge that's listed is regulatory requirements and community expectations of improved performance. No doubt the regulatory requirements coming from central government are an issue, and I believe the appropriate response for us is to simply drag the chain on meeting these, because our community expectations, the people I speak to, are actually quite happy with Dunedin's water services by and large, and really don't want to be paying the extra 100 million that we look like we're going to be throwing at them virtually every year coming up. The need to reduce the carbon footprint of Three Waters activities, again, is a piece of ideology I believe we can't afford. And the last challenge point, increasing costs that challenge the affordability of services. There are always increasing costs, and a lot of that has to do with the decreasing value of money. So, in my view, the alarming, the sobering, and the reasons to worry regarding our Three Waters infrastructure are largely imagined and not real, and that the amount of money that we have been ramping up since the 2015 floods has been, I think, appropriate for the first 5 years that we did it, but in recent years we've continued to massively increase and debt fund extraordinary amounts of money on the water system, and talk about basically increasing levels of service for external villages, etc., around Dunedin. I don't think we can afford any of that currently, and we certainly can't afford to debt fund it. We need to look at what we can afford, and we need to recognise that we have already a much better water system for any of the Three Waters than most of the councils around us.
My observation is that things go in cycles. And I remember back in the day talking to Josie Jones, actually, who was a councillor in this council, who was very distressed about the state of Dunedin's water, and as were most of the population, because the water did taste terrible, and it certainly didn't meet much in the way of a standard. But the result of that was Deep Stream and the Deep Creek project, which gave us a really good supply of fresh water deep in the Lammerlaws. But of course, things change, and so two things have happened. People get complacent. I think ratepayers get complacent about the costs of maintaining and looking after something that is working well. So the eye goes off the ball and attention gets paid to other things, and so that the level of maintenance required, and of course continued development to improve the water supply in other areas and other elements of water supply and treatment, takes attention away and money gets spent there. And so, complacency sets in, and we've redressed that in recent years, and we're now spending quite a bit more on our water system. And I think it's important to have our level of expenditure on our water system at appropriate to the size and amount of infrastructure and the quality of infrastructure that we want to have, and the size and breadth of the infrastructure that we have to look after and service. So it's natural that the price of water needs to go up. We simply have not been putting enough money into it, and I agree with Councillor Vandervis, the continued debt funding of everything without a repayment plan, without being able to pay it back, is inappropriate for the expenditure we do need to be making, because of course even the Deep Stream project, as we've just heard, is not going to be sufficient for our needs. And the thing I like about this report is that it's very concise. It's not a long and wordy report. However, there's a great depth of knowledge and information behind it. And as we saw, as we heard from the questions, it took a lot of questions, and it was great to have, much more detailed answers behind all of those questions. So there's a lot of thought gone into a concise report that we can get the high level view, but we know, and I think it should be reassuring for everyone present, that the depth of knowledge and preparation and research has gone into producing these relatively few words, but they carry a lot of meaning with them. So in terms with the changing cycle, we have environmental effects, environmental adversity to deal with in our world these days. So it's getting drier, it's getting wetter, and it doesn't happen in a nice, even continuum. If we had consistent rain all the time and consistent levels of sunshine, it'd be all very well. But typically we get it too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. So we have to be able to deal with those extremes. We have to be better prepared to deal with those extremes. And unfortunately, what that means is we have to pay more into our water system to make it resilient for the future, so that we do have sustainable sources and treatment and ways of dealing with water, whether it be fresh, waste or stormwater. So something to look forward to as we move into the future.
Any more speakers? I'll exercise my right of reply that I didn't start off. I just want to start out that Three Waters, in terms of cost, the cost at the lowest cost is drinking water, and then sewage, and then stormwater. Stormwater by itself is by far away the most expensive of our Three Waters, and it makes up almost 50% of your water bill. So when we say we have great water and you're only talking about water out of your tap, you're only talking probably about 10 or 15% of our Three Waters costs. It's the stuff you flush away and don't think about, and the stormwater system that works until it doesn't work and you get flooded. That's when you notice it. So that's why when we invest in that area, a lot of people go, why are you investing? You're wasting your money. I've talked to lots of people and they don't see why you need to invest. Well, that's because you don't see the need to invest until it fails on you, and then you're like, why didn't you invest? I'd like to point out that we're not a non-growing city. We're one of only 8 Tier 2 growth cities in the country. There are only 5 Tier 1s, and there are only 8 Tier 2s, and we are one of them. So please stop calling us dying when we're growing. And then the biggest issue...
Point of order.
Thank you.
I never made any reference to dying. I've been grossly misrepresented.
I will withdraw for my gross misrepresentation of your behaviour. So, carrying on. We have not always been in this situation because, in fact, government used to help us. Until the mid-1980s, we were subsidised in Three Waters the same way we were subsidised in transport. And when government withdrew that subsidies, councils stopped filling in the gap, so we've been falling behind. We have done a lot to catch up, and we are well positioned compared to a lot of other councils. And yes, it came with debt, because you don't pay for that capital works in real time, you pay for it with capital debt. The fact is, though, that we have to also now deal with growth, sitting on top of that, and we also have to deal with some changing factors that are coming towards us. This report is not alarming. I wouldn't like to use the word alarming. It is, in fact, it is a cogent response to the changes in front of us and planning out what we need to do in the future. But it is definitely a call to action. There is no more opportunity to keep closing your eyes and covering your ears to this, because we have issues. There's some's not even on here, like the sewer plants for the North Coast are not even sitting necessarily on this report, and I know they're sitting there. And I want to touch on the future development strategy, and Councillor Lucas sat on there with me and did say to me afterwards it was illuminating to see how large and complex our system is, how well it works in most places, but the places it needs to be upgraded in order to functionally work properly. And so I very much like this report. Water conservation will probably need to come, but we need to have a real discussion on the mechanism by which it is achieved. If we are going to put it back down to the households, there's not just water meters, there are 2 other methods. You can just have a straight restriction valve, or you can have a dose meter which gives you a daily dose and then cuts you off. There's lots of different ways to do it, and the other 2 don't require any administrative overhead, so I would like that looked at when we get into that situation. To the governance on the integrated systems planning, I would encourage the staff to consider allowing councillors in on that, and for the very same reason that we sit on, and it took a while to get it on there, in connecting Dunedin and in our transport department. There is a useful role for the governance in these early planning environments. They perform two functions. One is they can give you feedback immediately as to what they're thinking, and they can take from that planning back to the councillors and talk around the council before we get to a formal environment, because it's really important to be able to sometimes sort this thing out to make sure that what comes to us is in the good form. And just want to finish on our future water supplies for drinkable water. There is no doubt that we have had 2 water restrictions in the last 2 years that are directly related to the amount of water, the amount of rain that has been landing on the Lammerlaws. I have been told, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think the last 4 years have all been below average. So we're talking about a water supply system that is in fact going to, regardless of any regulation, going to stop supplying us soon. We're not in a Cape Town situation yet, but we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where they came within 1 day of failure of a supply because they didn't act far enough out in advance. So the integrated system planning is really looking at what we need, clearly and honestly describing it, and then it's up to us on this council to determine what we want to do about funding it and making sure it does or does not, because we may choose not to, but then we need to know that we deliberately chose not to do something if we do that. And that's one of the reasons I believe that having governance on that particular committee is actually quite relevant in terms of setting us up to respond well to staff's needs. So with that, I put it. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Now I've got a question. It's 10 o'clock. Sorry. It's noon, but do we want to stop for a lunch break or carry on? Item 10 is what I read out there. Carry on. Okay, so okay, let's take a 10-minute adjournment. Seconded, Councillor Fisa. All those in favour? And then, Scott wants to say something for you, Jim.
Yeah, apologies, just really quickly. I made a comment earlier at an earlier item that there was an additional council meeting on the 17th of September. Just want to correct that to it's an additional ISCOM meeting. It's just a correction.
Cool.
Apologies.
Okay, I move we get passed. All those in favour? Aye. Adjourned. 11 minutes past 12. I'm sure Councillor Wiley will be back here in a second. So I am ready to call this meeting back to order. Very good. Item 10, proposed parking changes from the Hearings Committee, July 24, with attachments on 55, basically through to 71. Thank you, Mr. Spears. Mr. Jen, do you want to speak to it?
No, we'll take it as read, but we're happy to answer questions.
Very good. Do we have any questions on the parking? Councillor Van der Vis.
Why is it in options given that despite the feedback which has been, very comprehensively done, you've comprehensively asked affected people what these changes are going to, what they think of the changes. A lot of them have said they don't like the idea of losing car parks, and yet in your options you say there are no disadvantages despite the loss of 12 car parks. Why is it, A, that the consultation is not reflected and seems to be, in fact, comprehensively ignored? And why is it also...
Point of order. This has gone through a committee to be considered. So are you saying the committee ignored it?
I'm saying that there's no sign of the consultation in the options which claim that there are no disadvantages when those consulted have, a number of them, listed the disadvantage of loss of parks.
Do you realise this is an output from a committee? It's not a hearing. The hearings were then, and then the committee has decided from the hearings where they consider all the evidence in front of them. So I just want to know, do you understand that this is not a hearing at the moment? That the evidence went to a committee and the committee's output is what's in front of you?
You're questioning my understanding, Chair O'Malley. I find offensive. I've been here much longer than you and do know the difference between a hearing and a meeting.
Well then, can you please confine your questions to the output of the committee, please?
I'm making my comments based on the agenda item 10 and
okay,
the
well then I'm
comments
going
in
to
it
call
that
the
are
point
in
of
front
order.
of me.
I just need to get the point of order correct. Point of order I'm going to point out is that it's basically 25.2c irrelevance because you are pointing to an activity that had occurred before this, which is the hearing of submissions to come to a conclusion and a decision, and that decision is now being presented to the council, not the evidence but the decision of the committee. And so I'm going to have to adjourn because Councillor Wheeler was going to have to make the decision. So I adjourn for 5 minutes. Seconded Councillor Mayhem. All those in favour?
it could possibly have been worded differently, because there obviously are some disadvantages, and I note that, and thank you for Councillor Vandervis for bringing that up. However, moving forward, I will not uphold the point of order, and staff have noted the concerns raised by Councillor Vandervis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wetherell. Councillor Vandervis, you can continue your questioning if you wish. Our staff will have to come back for it.
Thank you, Councillor Wetherell. My other comment that I wanted to make briefly was that this is yet another in a long, long line of staff safety improvements, most of which I think make quite good sense, invariably resulting in loss of parks. But I can't remember the last time we had a staff report where there was a concerted effort to actually improve or increase the number of parks that are available in the town. And there are an extraordinarily large number of opportunities for this to happen. I have in the past sent staff photographs of very wide streets that could accommodate another 30% of parking with just angle parking, so just with a bucket of white paint, basically you get a whole lot more parks, very low cost. My question is, why is it that we keep getting these reports with loss of parking, sometimes diminished as in the options, but we don't seem to have any staff interest in actually creating more parks or optimising parking areas? I'm thinking of Lee Street, I'm thinking of a number of other wide streets around the place that could very easily accommodate a lot more parking.
We do respond where we get requests for more parking. I'm sorry, I haven't seen anything come through from you with suggestions to add angle parking. For streets like Lee Street, they're being looked at under the Princess Street connection. So there is an intention, depending on how that project goes, to possibly put more angled parking in that area.
Councillor Mayor Radich.
Yes, Councillor Vandervis almost asked my question, which is, was there consideration, the loss of parks in this these proposals is really around the schools, where the build-outs are on the corners and curbs to make it safer for the kids to get across. Yeah, so which is, you know, a helpful safety improvement. Was there consideration given to finding more parks to replace those, because there are a lot of parents that pick up and drop off their kids to school and after school and so forth. So parking around schools is always in keen demand. And my observation over the years is that parents always want to have accessible parking, you know, accessible for them in their cars, accessible parking to close to the school. So was there any consideration to put into finding more parks?
Through the project, they look at the environment and where parking may be able to be added, but they don't specifically look at putting in more parking unless an opportunity arises.
You're saying no opportunities were found in these cases?
I can't comment on these particular pieces of consultation, but they do look in general, but nothing was added in.
Mr Mayor, we do look, particularly when we're looking at parking changes, at where we can increase parking turnover so that more people can get parking areas. So we do that on a reasonably regular basis as part of the parking changes.
And just to follow up on that, would it be fair to say, because I mean I've seen a fair amount of the school design, that you are looking at drop-off and pick-up zones often as not in those designs, as opposed to a person parking and walking in?
Yeah, pick up and drop off or short-term parking is key to making the school environment work well.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to confirm that the reason that we are looking at these parking changes is because there was a number of businesses, I believe it's 4 businesses, plus schools, plus individuals. Oh no, it's back working. And these parking changes are basically in response to the community and businesses asking for them. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Councillor Houlihan.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Barker's actually said everything I was going to say, but I could add to that some of the previous speakers have said, you know, concerns around the parking. I am concerned about parking as well. However, when I read this report, almost every single parking situation there, except for the schools, where the schools, we were all sat around this table. Sorry, I've got a question. My question is it fair to say that these, well, it's actually, sorry, it's the same question as Councillor Barker, that you've been proactive, is it true that you were proactive, you've looked at the concerns businesses had, schools had, and you've assessed it and made changes after they applied and asked for those changes?
That is correct.
Councillor Gary.
2 questions. Are you aware, going through this process, of the considerable appreciation from schools at being part of a process like this, and then secondly at the outcomes for increasing the safety for their students? Are you aware of the depth of appreciation that this work is being considered and then delivered?
Yes, we do get quite a bit of feedback. A lot of these consultation processes are multi-stage, and there's a lot of to and fro in designs. We can't always incorporate everyone's wishes, but we do our best.
And I also had a tangential question, and I honestly don't recall where I saw it. I feel like I saw it on Facebook but it was a little clip around, or maybe it was in here. It was in here, and it was the link, which talked about alternatives to arriving at school. Do you know the one I mean? Was that the link here? So it was, you know, you can arrange a drop-off a little bit further away from the school and then walk the rest of the distance. You can scooter, you can bike, you can drop off by car, but, you know, and it talked about the congestion and so forth. And that came out of, was that a Wakakatahi or a DCC little...
It's a DCC piece of work which is co-funded by Wakakatahi, and so we help schools work to give options for people to travel to the school.
Would it be possible to send that around council in case they missed it? Because it's a really good, excellent piece of work.
Any more questions? Okay, then I move that the committee adopts the proposed changes to parking and traffic restrictions shown in the July 24 updates of the Dunedin City Council's traffic and parking restrictions database. B, notes that the committee has considered feedback from consultation on the proposed changes to parking restrictions, and notes that all parking restrictions previously approved by the council remain unchanged. Seconder, Councillor Lucas. I'm just going to speak to it briefly. First, I want to thank Councillor Lucas and Councillor Mayhem for sitting on this committee with me, because other than the speed limits committee, this is probably the dog control as well. But there are a few committees that really you don't get hardly any thanks for being on, because in fact you make changes that are often, as Part B of that motion says, considering the feedback from the consultation and the staff recommendation, and you come up with what I try to come up with, and I'm confident that my panel members do as well, what is best for the outcome for the community. And it does get a bit frustrating that when you come out with the final product, you basically treat it as if you were deliberately trying to take away car parks, because that is not the intention of anybody on this committee. I want to thank the staff for everything they do. It is a lot of work to put together this big a consultation project, and when you're designing things like the drop-off and pickups around a school, you've got tons of people who have different opinions, and they are not all compatible, which means you have to say no to some to be able to say yes to others. That is the product of consultation, and that's basically it from me. Speakers. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, and I just want to say that I take my role on this committee quite seriously, and I often drive past the areas where there's parking to be changed, and often I call the schools. And to Councillor Van der Vis's question is that I often question the staff about, can we, you know, did they look to add in more parks? Can we actually reduce the, you know, does it have to be that number? So I'm constantly questioning that. And I do know from the schools, from a lot that I've talked about, that they are very grateful, and it is a very long process, often 2 years. And if I look here at Balmacewen School, if anybody has ever been to drop off or pick up at Balmacewen School, it is a nightmare, and there is no ability on any of the side streets to add in extra parks. But they're very grateful for finally getting some safe crossings and some work done there, and it is having a huge impact on the school as we speak because that work is being carried out. But I'm very grateful to the staff, and they, those you'll be pleased to know, especially Councillor Van Andvis and Mr Mayor, that removing parks is dear to my heart, and I fight hard to minimise that.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yes, I'm one of the first to speak up if I think parks are going. However, I pulled up and looked at every single diagram for these parks and how it's impacted it, and I really couldn't complain about anything, because there was one perhaps in Princess Street I thought, oh, but that was actually good because it was putting a park in there. It was, and I know I've been lobbied by people who, you know, as I've mentioned numerous times about the Oval, where they can't get parks because of the issue when they're playing football or rugby or whatever they play over there, and they can't get a park to get in. I mean, I've been guilty of pulling up on the side of the footpath myself there. You can't even get in, or parking on the grass. But besides that point, every single one of those parks, bar the ones around the schools, and the schools, but those individual parks where it changes, adding, like, say, for going from half an hour parking to 5 minutes, so it was changing over for a business, so the business had more rotation of people coming in, and they were requests from business owners. So, and then every single school example, the schools sent letters to us, because we know, because we've had that come up before here. All the schools have written in and pleaded with us to please make it safer around their areas around their school. And I know initially some things that were done on the road around the schools in the trial were a bit upsetting when they put big banners and structures jutting out all over the street, but hopefully these are done more tastefully than that. But I mean, I just can't vote against safety measures as a mother around the school. I think, you know, if schools are asking for it, we need to do what we can to help fix that problem. And the other ones I see as actually being an aid to businesses, because it's helping them turn over more parking so that they can get different people in, and hoping that they can, you know, move traffic along and get new people to come into their shop. So I saw that as a huge advantage, and I couldn't fault it. So thank you very much to the committee.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm not a transport engineer, but I am a mother and a member of the community, and I know that the work that our staff do is based on evidence, and we've had the opportunity in some cases to trial some solutions. The idea of a trial in the past is to trial it and see if it works, and you're not committed to it. So I just make that point in relation to the previous speaker. However, I'm much more concerned about safety than I am about parking, because parking is about convenience, inconvenience, and that's of lesser importance to me and should be to all of us than safety. And we heard somebody this morning talking about safety in regard to their 14-year-old. I know from the conversations I've had in the community that the schools deeply appreciate the consultation that our staff have done over a period of time. They deeply appreciate the suggestions, the recommendations that have come through this, and I know the work that goes in behind being on a panel like this and making the decisions and recommendations. It's not something you take lightly, and you're never going to please everybody, and the people who are making submissions do not have the information that our staff have in terms of best practice. We can all react to something and have a good idea, but it isn't necessarily going to be the right thing to do in terms of an evidence-based decision. So I am delighted that in particular the school work continues, and we've seen an improvement for the safety of students around our schools in Dunedin, and I'm really proud of that as a councillor, as a governor, and thank our staff most sincerely. Thank you to the committee, you did a great job. I'm very happy to support your recommendations.
Mr Mayor.
Yes, I think my number one takeaway my first initial takeaway from this report was the fact that the committee took a great deal of notice of the submissions. So many of the proposals were changed by the feedback received by the committee. And I thought that was, a very good result, and it was all, listed out in the in our report that we got. And I think a great many of the changes to the parking was evenly balanced. So there were parks changed in designation but not taken away. And particularly, as Councillor Hurland pointed out, in Princes Street, where there were extra bus parks put in there, we've now seen a couple of bus parks removed and cars be able to park there, because I know it made a significant difference to a particular couple of hospitality businesses on that street that certainly noticed the effect of the lack of carriage trade for them. As a general rule, I think it would be a good philosophy for parking people, our parking staff, to adopt that if they're taking parks away, they should be looking hard for other parks. And I believe it's clear that that is considered, but I think it should be, there should be a lot of attention put into trying to keep the balance there, because one of the things that we have heard continually at throughout annual plan and long-term plan submissions is that parking in Dunedin is a problem. So I don't think we should be looking to try and make it worse. We should be looking to balance the situation at the least. But anyway, I think this is a good report and a good resolution of all of the difficulties that are involved with parking. And it is, the safety around schools is, of high importance for everyone.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the first thing is I'd like to put on the record that safety on the roads and around schools is not just the preserve of mothers, for those who have spoken earlier. And I'm pleased that we give priority to this sort of work. I want to compliment transport people for their response to one of my neighbours, who was the man who pestered them about the danger at the Cranston Street, Silverton Street intersection, one that I regularly use, but one that he actually did something about and finally got a solution that he is delighted with. I've sent him the picture of the new yellow lines. That's at paragraph 4, small 2 in the report. I also want to say thank you retrospectively to Transport staff for a warning sign they put on a suicidally dangerous left turn at Ross's Corner some time ago at my request, and so I've no doubt that they respond appropriately when matters like this are raised with them. As to the general questions of parking in Dunedin, I would suggest to those people who think parking is a problem that they should read the MR Cagney report, which we have had for some time, and some people have clearly not read, which says that parking is not a problem in Dunedin. What is a problem in Dunedin is wayfinding and the cost of parking. I'm not talking about the second one today, but I'll be asking again in a moment about the wayfinding, because I think our performance on that has been dismal, even though the decision was made 3 years ago and it was funded and nothing has happened yet.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee and the staff. I think this is a fine example of a robust process, and also shows Council's responsiveness to the community's requests. And I note that there, I asked the question specifically about the number of businesses that ask for parks. And I guess, how do you define a park is often what we should think about, when some of those parks were changed from P30s to P5s to help those businesses with turnover of parks. So I think that we also need to note that most of the parking isn't in the central city, and when we look at the statistics which complain about parking, it's central city parking. So I think we are absolutely doing the right thing. I also want to commend the there's 14 pages here of the feedback summary, and there's an example where someone was concerned about the removal of parking, and so So we have design after feedback. The courtesy crossing was removed, a new crossing point was designed close to the roundabout, and no stopping lines have been decreased to retain more on-street parking nearby. So I think that staff have been, and the committee have been extremely responsive to the community's concerns, and it looks, even if they waited 2 years, it's great to see these coming to council, and I think that people should be very pleased with the increased safety in the businesses, with the council's responsiveness to adding parks when new businesses start.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you. Safety around on roads and around schools is a priority, and I'd like to commend the staff for all of their efforts, and we receive a lot of feedback and always investigate the alternatives and look at further information or stats around any controversial decisions. I'll concur with what Deputy Mayor Lucas has said about how thoroughly she looks into all of these different issues on the parking hearings, and her and Councillor O'Malley also, I can attest, will visit these sites and check out everything that's on paper. And if you look at the number of people that have opposed any of these changes, the outside Pine Hall School, for example, there was only one complaint actually about loss of parking. The two other people complaining were saying things like, it's a waste of money, why don't you just put another pedestrian crossing there? And another person even said children need to be aware of their own safety and learn the road rules. Well, we had someone come and speak at the public forum this morning. Children aren't silly. But there isn't an impenetrable bubble around them that protects them from motor vehicles. And, I will stand by every single decision that we make on the Hearings Committee, especially if it pertains to pedestrian safety, because we're quite shocking here in Dunedin. I don't know how many times I read in the newspaper headlines yet again about a pedestrian being hit whilst trying to cross the road. Well, that's nothing to do with getting rid of parks or a car cancelling culture. It's 100% about us all sharing the roads and around pedestrian safety. And it may not be everybody's choice to sit on the Hearings Committee, but I feel like the decisions that we're making are largely around having a city that's accessible, safe, and the other things that were mentioned, wayfaring across the city, way overrule any loss of parks for me in my decision making. Thank you.
Any more speakers? Just in my reply then, just immediately following up the Councillor Mayhem's statement there, we were number 1, and I think we've only moved to number 2 for pedestrian danger in the city. We're one of the poorer performers, but we are actually improving as we brought in some of the pedestrian safety stuff we've had. We do site visits. This is not a casual thing. So if there is a controversial presentation that comes to us and we can't answer it in the room, we do get in the car, go to the site and look at the effect. So we do take this very seriously. Councillor Barker point out, often we're not taking away parks, we're changing the way a park is used, and in many of these business respects we've actually quite dramatically increased the number of parking events that occur in the day, because we've taken a park that could have been a 1 hour long park and then turned it down to 15 minutes or 30 to a 5. And that allows just more turnover in that area. A car that gets parked all day for commuter parking is actually a serious problem for us in the city in terms of parking care. So we're running into a situation where the city was smaller, it had less cars per household, it was relatively straightforward to come in and find yourself an 8 hour park somewhere within a couple of blocks of where you work. Those days are over. The car ownership per household is so high now that everybody's looking to park their car, and there just aren't enough. And we talked about sports events down at the Oval. I'm not sure, I think there's 5 fields down there, there might be 6. If you've got between 20 and 30 people playing on those fields, you've got somewhere around 120, 130 people. If they all come, mum and dad drives the individual player to the field and expects to find a car park. We don't have 150 car parks at the Oval. So part of this is just straight out physics and math. We can only supply so much parking. People also have to adapt their behaviours around the fact that we're a city and that in fact we are running out of space, and we have to use this space far more efficiently, which is a lot of this is about. And the school changes, they are coming right out of government mandate. We have to have it all done by 2025, and even this government didn't change that much. They did change some of the rules around the speeds and the signage and the hours, but even they agreed schools have to get done and we have to have it done by 2025. And so really, I want to just finish again by thanking the staff again and thanking my fellow members of this committee. This has always got almost the same outcome every time we come to council in terms of the discussion, but we really are trying to balance up a whole heap of competing needs and also make the city safer, especially around the schools where the vulnerable are. So with that, I put it, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Item 11, transport activity reports for the period ending 30 June 2024. And we have Mr. Smith and Ms. Benson. Take it, you want us to take it as read. I think I can fairly say that Councillor Benson Pope has a question for you.
I have three, I think. A first one I haven't flagged. I'm correct in assuming, am I not, that your brief includes not just the maintenance of paving, footpaths and so on, but their cleaning?
Yes, that's correct.
Like many Dunedin residents, I've been enjoying the film festival at the Regent just now. And I have to say that I'm embarrassed at the state of the bricks outside because they're covered in sludge and gunge. And I'm wondering why that hasn't been attended to. It really is unsightly, especially when we have our little electric ride-on scrubber, which I assume is still operating. So has either of you or anyone had a look at, would someone please have a look at what I'm referring to? It's basically outside the bar, mostly outside the region and around the seats. It is just disgraceful and it's an embarrassment to us.
Yeah, we can. Well, I'll go have a look after this, Councillor Benson Pope.
First of the next questions that I've raised earlier is they both relate to decisions that are quite dated. The first one to build and fund the boardwalk in Broad Bay, which was agreed in 2022. And I asked earlier why we're not seeing anything in the harbour or in the ground yet. Portobello, sorry, not Broad Bay. We don't want it in the wrong place, at least. Can you tell us why that has been delayed so long?
Yes, so there's been a mixture with that boardwalk of consents, and at the outset, I do believe there was a rough order cost put on it, Councillor, that was then repriced, so that made the capital go up a bit. It now currently sits in next year's plan. Scott will be able to tell me whether that has to get ratified as part of the 9-year plan. But I do know that those consents are in train now and the design is almost complete.
Thank you, that's most helpful. And the final question at the moment relates to an even earlier decision around the future Dunedin transport decisions, the whole raft of decisions, park and ride and all the rest of it, but in particular the parking wayfinding that I've asked you about on many occasions previously. Can you tell us what's happening and when we're likely to see some active information on the streets about where those parks are, please?
So, Councillor, if that's okay, I'll kind of answer the first overall Shaping Future Dunedin Transport Programme question, and then Simon will talk to you about specifics around parking. So we have the Mosgiel Park and Ride needing to have, as Councillor O'Malley alluded to before, a bridge built over the Alfero. So we've got to go through the resource consents on that one. So again, that one is in train, and depending on the balance of capital, will see that eventuate as part of that program. You've seen the Harbour Arterial Stage 2 completed, Stage 1, and Stages 2 and 3 have been designed and are reasonably ready to go. And Simon, I'll let you talk about.
Just on the wayfinding, it's a reasonably complicated piece of work. There's a network component and a technology component. So in terms of the technology, we've rolled out the pay-by-plate meters, which is the first component for sort of getting a better data picture on parking in the city. And we are currently putting license plate recognition systems into some of our off-street parking sites, which are needed to count the cars. So we have the data that will go to the signs we'll eventually have. And this year we're looking at procuring 2 of the signs on local roads. The other component, which is the network component, is for the signs to be most effective, they have to be on the state highway network. And at the moment there's a State Highway 88 program and a State Highway 1 program, as well as a lot of work being decided around sort of the networks around the hospital. So in order to make sure we get the best value for money for where we put the signs and try to encourage NZTA to invest in putting the gantries, we're just working through those projects at the moment. So we would like to see those signs on the southern and northern approaches to the city, and we'd like to see NZTA provide those. So you will start seeing something this financial year for gantries and wayfinding.
Sorry, and so I didn't catch the last part of what you said. When will we see some actual physical sign of this work?
We're building up a procurement for gantries on local roads this year, and then we'll probably lead into work with NZTA on gantries on the state highways in the following year if they're amenable. We're also looking at getting the technology we have to give us data on our website, so not just gantries. We'd like to be able to provide that data to other sites. This will be primarily focused on our own assets, but we're going to be working with Meridian and Wilson's and others to see how they can give us the information about their sites as well.
So this is a decision that was made and funded in 2021 before this council by more than a year, and it's still not really on the close horizon being realised.
We have to go through a process to make sure we get it right, I guess is what we would say. There is a lot of work happening around the hospital. We have to put, there'll be a lot of disruption. So we will be going and procuring gantries from this year onwards. Yes.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Just looking at the report, Kettle Park Protection Program, Bill Brown has been a bit of a critic of the sand sausages over the sandbags over the period of time. Are we keeping a data watch on the area between the 2 sets of sand geobags and the effect on the erosion or the end wall effect of the sandbags, the geobags?
Yes, we are. We're monitoring that area through both Coast Snap and through consultants monitoring sand movements. Sorry.
My other question relates to 3 Mile Hill. When I look at the time frame that the vehicle numbers were measured, there was also State Highway 1 was closed one way for a period of time, so a lot of people used 3 Mile Hill as a diversion route. Was that correct?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to compare other count times to see whether we had an elevated volume.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that there was one-way traffic of going to the airport was diverted down Rickerton Road, so a lot of people chose to use it as 3 Mile Hill, and I'm sure Councillor Lucas would be able to give us some advice on that since she travels that quite frequently. But my other question is, I was surprised there was no mention of the speeds on 3 Mile Hill in relation to uphill or downhill. It just, I noticed that there was a quick comment about that. It was just all vehicles were measured on that number.
That's down to the technology that we use the tube counts, the rubber strips, and it's difficult to analyse what's going uphill and what's going downhill. We have to put them across the full width of the carriageway. So it's just taking an average of uphill and downhill traffic.
But when it comes to speeds, not the number of vehicles?
Yep, that is an average speed of uphill and downhill.
So it's the speed between the two. I'm sorry, I read it as that you had site 1. You had did you have 2 tubes at site 1 or just 1 tube and 2 at site 2?
Yep, they're separate count sites. So they're the 2 tubes sitting there that take the speed at that point, and then, yep. Okay.
Councillor Lucas.
Following on from Councillor Wiley, and yes, I would have thought you would have been able to differentiate up or downhill, because I travel that road every day. I mean, clearly people are going faster coming down the hill, especially when you get to site 1. So is it because of these counts, as the new signs that have gone in high crash area? Is it the result of these counts? Because my question is, I was surprised to see the signs that have gone up. I understand the one at the bottom of the hill, but where the one has gone in at the top of the hill, which is not far from site 1, because I would have thought you would have put that sign right up the top where that big sweeping corner is, because a lot of people crashed because they don't understand the camber of the road. And so is that why that sign's gone in just down here, near to site 1?
I'd have to talk to our safety team about the location of the signs.
Councillor, I think you'll find that that they have to consider sight lines and a whole bunch of other complexities around the actual road before they put the signs in, but we can find out.
Because the sign when you're coming down the hill is not that obvious to see. The one going up is, and it's everybody I've said is very surprised it wasn't right at the top of the hill. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
You know, I follow up next. I drive that road quite a lot too, and I can actually completely understand the how people got around one corner faster than another. Yeah. And why did any particular reason you didn't do those big sweeping turns to the top? Because they are by far and away the most dangerous. Because you think that they are easy, and then you're halfway around them and they're enormous, and then people just go off the side. And do you know, is it crash statistics that made you focus on this section?
Yeah, it was purely the word of mouth at where the accidents had happened recently that we chose those 2 sites.
Okay. Oh, here's another word of mouth. The top's really bad too. Councillor Van der Vis.
My question's already been asked. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Mayhem.
I did have similar questions about 3 Mile Hill, but I think they've been covered. Going back to the Kettle Park Protection Project, so the 500 metres of geobags that are being placed at the foot of the dunes, are there not any there already? Didn't we? And is this an additional cost? Because I remember it came to us that we voted for this to happen as a preventative measure, and so is this some extra? And are we happy at the moment because we haven't really had very many storms this season? We've been lucky with that sand building up.
Yeah, so this is part of that work that was approved by council for the construction of the geobags. We've been very fortunate in so far on a couple of reasons. The first one is we've managed to save quite a bit of money, and the second reason is you're absolutely right. The swells this year have been in favour of us in terms of the collection of sand. And we continue on through that. The only thing that I would say is that given we haven't had all weathers thrown at us in this short time that we've been putting those geobags there, it will be an ongoing brief with how those geobags are managing the situation over the next few months. But yes, the answer to the question is yes, that's part of the original budget that you approved.
So just to ask again, so at the moment there are no geobags there at Kettle Park and they're just being installed now?
No, there are geobags there at Kettle Park now.
Yeah, I just have the one question, and it's on the Dunedin cycleways and the Chain Hills Tunnel. So there's work starting on the first section of the trail from Gladstone Road to the tunnels.
That is certainly our intention, councillor. We're currently discussing with the trust an alternative idea that they have for that particular section. But yes, that is our intention.
So my question is, at the other end of that whole infrastructure is the Caversham Tunnel. And I'm aware that there are 3 pieces of infrastructure in the tunnel, which is our sewer line, Aurora's high voltage line, and Nova's pressurised gas line. As far as I can tell, there hasn't been any discernible work about getting those 3 items out of that tunnel since we've started this whole project. And although we don't, although that'll be, if you're coming from the Mosgiel end, that'll be the last thing you do, I'm a bit worried that it's going to, when we get there, we're going to say, oh, that's 5 years worth of work to be done to get that stuff out of the tunnel. So can we, in the future, also make sure that Caversham Tunnel's kept up in the whole design consideration? Because otherwise I'm just really concerned that it's going to get approached at the end because we're coming from the other end. So that's actually a request for keeping that up. Cool. Any other questions? Well then, I'd like to thank...
Sorry.
Oh, Mr. Mayor.
Further to the Chair's question about the services in that tunnel, is it, my understanding is that it's only the wastewater pipe with its vents that is the problem. Everything else could remain buried there. Well, could be buried there.
I think Councillor O'Malley's point about the fact that we haven't got there yet, it would be too late to be able to say that, Mr. Mayor. It's a long way away from where we're currently working.
Whether they need to move or could be buried or whatever. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, then I move that the committee notes the transport activity report for the period ending 30th of June 2024. Seconded, Councillor Weatherall. Anybody want to speak to it? Okay, then the fact that nobody wants to speak to it, I put it. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Item 12, Waste and Environmental Solutions Activity Report for the period ending 30th June 2024. And we have Mr. Henderson. Welcome, Mr. Henderson. Do you want to speak to the report at all, or just questions?
There is yet no, thank you. I'm happy to take the report as read and respond to questions.
Cool. Do we have any questions? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Just have a question around, we've got a lovely pie diagram or pie graph of the organics and the refuse tonnes, and I just wondered, do we collect the statistics on how much cardboard and how much glass we collect as well, just to give that full picture of what's going in all the bins and being weighed?
Under normal circumstances, yes, but at the moment with our recycling going to Timaru, what's being processed through the Timaru MRF, it includes Timaru's cardboard and recycling, so I can't give you figures for Dunedin at the moment.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. One is in relation to the target for the amount of municipal solid waste per person, which is at 638 kilos. And in your commentary on page 80, and you talk about, with the introduction of the new curbside services and the sorting facilities, that's expected to significantly reduce the solid waste disposed to landfill. So my question really is, why is the target so high? Because we're never going to achieve that. We actually want a target that's lower. We want to be reducing, do we not want to be reducing waste? And so why would we want to be aiming to achieve 638 kilos per person? I thought we're supposed to go the other way.
That's simply the target that was adopted as part of the last long-term plan.
So, we could review that as part of the next LTP.
Yeah, and in fact, there's revised targets already in the draft WMP, and those the targets in the draft WMP will also flow into the 9-year plan.
Thank you. And my other question is on the top of page 82, when you talk about waste minimisation contestable grants for and then you talk about the waste levy also annually provides grants with funds approved under delegation for non-contested community service agreements, which I sat on the grants subcommittee and I wasn't aware that there was other grants which are significant to the ones that we give out on the committee, as I think we can give out a maximum of $5,000. Oh, no, some are. So I'm just not sure. So I was just wanting to know where these come from, and are they a new thing or are they ongoing, and how they work?
Thank you, Councillor. They're relatively new for the waste grants side of things. They've been done in the community service level agreements have been done in the community areas. Community and events team have been doing them for quite some time. They're actually done under my delegation, but approved by the chair of the grants subcommittee.
So how does somebody go about getting one of these? Because I'm thinking some of those, if other people knew that they were available, would be great that they wouldn't then have to, go through the other process of applying. And so I was just kind of surprised to see them sitting here.
Yeah, one of the main criteria there is actually for if they're actually long-term successful. So they'd be, starting from scratch. There'd be someone that has actually applied for grants in the past, and basically someone that keeps coming back for grants every year, and then they would actually put a proposal to us for ongoing funding. So Kiwi Harvest being the best example, who've been around for a very long time, have been coming to us for a grant every year for some time, and then rather than having to come back every time, they put a proposal to us, which is then put forward for approval or denial, and that is for ongoing funding for those activities.
But that doesn't preclude them from coming through the grant scheme, because if you use Kiwi Harvest, for example, I know that they applied in the last round, and that was when we became aware of this, thanks to Councillor Barker asking a question before the meeting. So that doesn't preclude them from applying in other funds if they already get this.
I might take this. I've actually asked for us to pause that process for a while, given that we've got a grants review taking place and a grants subcommittee, and then we've got grants happening here. So just until we can get a better structure and process around it. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Henderson, there was an article in the ODT just at the weekend, an Otago Girls High School student who's off to Brazil. She worked on a project around recycling food waste from Dunedin businesses and turning it into compost. Was there any interaction between her and the team at all?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Well, it's something to celebrate anyway. I thought there was some mention of council in here, but I just don't recall. And the other question I wanted to ask was, what was the reaction of the team to the figure of the 45% of the waste that was in the green bins, the 665 tonnes of food and green waste, which, I mean, I celebrated. What was the reaction of the team to that? Were you pleased? Did it meet your expectations?
We're very pleased with the uptake so far. What's probably been the most pleasing to us is the lack of contamination we're receiving. That's actually been, we're incredibly happy with the low, very, very low contamination of the material that's coming in.
I noted that and I wondered, what did you put that down to? Was it the labelling on the lid or education that was done?
Yeah, we're hoping it was down to good communication before the service started of what couldn't go in. We obviously did a lot of Facebook and media and the booklets obviously that went out with the bins, etc. We're hoping that's reflective of how much effort we put into the communication. Yeah.
And do you think the community's got the message that you can put noxious weeds in there? Because I certainly found when we were doing our annual plan consultation, there was a lot of confusion about that, but I wonder if people have moved on and understand that they can. It's a great chance to clean up the property and put the weeds in there that they might not want to put in their compost.
I think so. We've made sure that on our website, the FAQs and on the curbside app, we've made sure that does talk about weeds, but there's a bit of a fine line there, because you've also got to make sure that anything that's been sprayed with weed killer we don't want. So, yeah.
Speaking of which, are we testing for the presence of those chemicals in the commercial composting units, like the one we use in Timaru, and then when it gets down here?
Yeah, the output from the Timaru plant's definitely tested. Yeah, there is a New Zealand standard for compost. Yep.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to add my congratulations on the app. I think it's extremely helpful. For those people who haven't got it, I hope they've got a card or something that separates the information so efficiently. And I've found it very interesting actually looking at the size of the bins as a two-person household rather. We're finding that we've got heaps of capacity because of the extra separation. But there has been criticism of the bin size for waste in particular. Has that settled down now, as people have, discovered that there are several bins, not just two anymore, or one or none?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I guess the size of the bins we've got out at the moment, obviously it is a compromise. It's not going to suit everyone. We are finding that by far the majority of people are finding they've got enough space now. We're receiving very little feedback now on the size of the bin. People are starting to use the whole system.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Yeah, the communication around this was absolutely brilliant, both before and also on the bins themselves, although I'm yet to determine my usage of cardboard. But anyway, a couple of questions for you. The level 5, the level of service, I know I've asked this question before, but if the target is so far, sorry, I'm talking about the amount of municipal solid waste per person. If the target is so far out from what we actually already achieve, I'm curious as to what adjustment to the target are we considering? Because we're obviously beating it easily.
Well, we haven't actually got into the 9-year plan levels of service yet, so I can't remember off the top of my head what's in the draft WMMP. Sorry, but yeah, there is a new target in that. I just can't remember, sorry, what it is.
My other question is on page 83, whatever the number that is, 6P, Smooth Hill Landfill. Now, obviously, we've got the 3-year baseline environmental going on at the moment, so I'm assuming that, I'm not going to say work has come to a halt or anything, but there's limited amount that can be done at the moment while we do the baseline and we do rodent, pest control, etc. So I guess my question is, at the same time, we have also made a commitment to have public consultation, but with nothing to consult on, with nothing to report. Are we adjusting our consultation periods?
Sorry, just need to clarify, Councillor, when you're talking about consultation, are you talking about the community liaison group, or?
I believe it was quarterly or something thereabouts. At one stage there was discussion of quarterly public meetings, ostensibly to give updates on what was happening.
I can't speak to that. I know I am aware, obviously, the community liaison group was established as part of the resource consents for Smooth Hill Landfill. But yeah, at the moment, there has been a number of those meetings, 3 or perhaps 4 of those meetings have occurred. But at the moment, there is that unfortunate fact that there's very little to actually report or talk about because we are just in that baseline monitoring phase.
So therefore, if there's nothing to report, there's no point having the meeting. Okay, cool.
Councillor Wiley.
I notice in looking at the report, actually I'm going to change my question on this one. We've seen stories in the media about developers or people doing subdivisions or things like that around lead in the soil testing and all that work. Is there anywhere within our city boundary that soil can be taken once removed, except to Nash and Ross?
It can actually go to Green Island as well as contaminated soil. As a Class 1 municipal landfill, it can go to Green Island as well as Nash and Ross. Our preference obviously is that it doesn't go to Green Island because it's obviously valuable as the space in Green Island is running out. We prefer not to fill it just with soil.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had some complaints from people about the cost of the bins, well, to them, but mainly to council, well, both. The council had to pay initially to get the new bins. And the question they put to me is, why did we spend all that money, you know, on those sort of bins? Could we not have got something that was cheaper? And some people have said that the bin we have for the food composting in there, they said people could have easily used an empty ice cream container and just put scraps in there. Why did we need to spend all that money on that for every household? Are you able to answer any of those questions, complaints?
To be honest, I don't. I think we made the decision on the cost of that, and
Right.
we can't ask staff to comment on a council decision.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wondered if we'd looked at any other options for cheaper options, that was all, or if there's any other way around it. That's fine, thank you.
I guess the one thing I would say there is that we did go to market for the bin procurement, so that was an open market procurement to start with for those bins. Yeah.
I just have one, and it's 0.6N on page 82. It's 50% use of the green bin. Are you assuming when you say that, because then it says education will be followed, are you assuming that it's been underused? Because the only reason I'm asking that is that my green bin will probably never go out on the road. So, and with a lot of bins, I don't put it out. If it's half full, I put it out on the next cycle. So what's that interpretation of the 50% use there? Is it, do you think people aren't using it enough, or is it just a number at the moment?
I think it's just a number at the moment. It's simply based on the fact we do know exactly how many pickups the trucks do, so they count every time a bin is picked up. We don't have really enough data to make any long-term predictions around that, but yeah, basically basing it on the fact that it seems to be about 50% of the bins are coming out regularly for collection. But yeah, we need longer-term data before we can actually make any real calls on that.
And the other side of that question is, if they're not putting them out, they might still be putting organics in the red bin. When's the next audit going to be done on the red bins for us to get a sense of the impact of this?
We don't have one planned at the moment, but normally we would do one be next year after we've adopted the new WMMP. We'd be wanting to do a swap audit on the landfill in order to establish re-establish our baseline.
How long does it take to do one?
Normally do 2 a year, one at different times of the year. It's a 2-week process, normally at different times of the year, so you can actually try and get a good subset of data. So 6 months apart, so 6 to 7 months to actually complete a swap audit.
So we've done one fairly recently then, obviously, before we rolled this out?
Yeah, we did one for the...
Otago South.
Yeah, the regional waste analysis that was done was the last one we've done, yes.
Okay. And the next one then will probably give us a good indication of actual impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Gilbert.
Sorry, just to follow up on that one. Regarding the 50%, I know I'm being pedantic at this point, but do we have the data, or the detail in the data to know whether it is the same 50%? Rather than just getting, we always get 50% of all the bins that are out there, do we know whether we get more or less the same 50%? Does that make sense?
We don't at the moment, but our contractor does, because obviously all the trucks are geolocated. So over time, we'll be able to establish whether they're always picking up a green bin at the same address and which ones they don't stop at.
If I may just chime in there, it's possibly also something to do with the time of the year that we're in. My sense is come springtime and summer, when people get stuck into their gardens, they'll potentially generate a lot more green waste. So we might see an uptake in greater than 50% of green bins.
Mr. Mayhem.
I think that my question follows on from that. So you could make an assumption that perhaps students aren't putting out their green bins because they don't have big gardens or any greenery, but they might be, waiting for their food scraps to build up. Or if you lived in the country and you've already got composting happening. So it would be interesting to see what you were saying about the geo locations. Yeah. So that leads, sorry, just some stats on geolocations. So that leads to my next question. If I had a very big garden full of weeds and I could fill a green bin every day for a week, and perhaps my neighbours weren't, am I able to collect up my neighbours' bins and all line them up, or is it going to be known that I'm using everybody else's bins?
I suggest you might want to ask your neighbours first, Councillor. You may have noticed each bin does actually have a barcode and a serial number on the side of it, so we know where each bin comes from. But that doesn't mean, as long as they've been put out on the curbside in the appropriate manner, there's no reason why we won't collect it or anything else. But also, just speaking to your earlier point, the tertiary area, most of those flat area, etc., they only receive the small bin because they do not have any gardens, so they've only got the 25 litre food scrap curbside bin.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see some stats in the future that just compared rural and inner city living and the uptake on the green waste. Thank you.
Councillor Hurleham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so, I mean, I know we're putting out like probably about that much in the bottom of the green bin, but every week, because we're a family, the red bin is full. Every fortnight. However, it would be, so it really, I'm getting feedback from numerous people about why aren't we picking up the red bin weekly instead of fortnightly, because I understand a single person in a house won't have this issue, but families are. It is actually quite an issue for families that are finding, the 2 weeks is too long for them for a turnaround.
I guess the counterpoint to that is we're also receiving feedback from people saying that families are only half using the bin. A lot of the new curbside, the case that we put to council when we adopted the new system it's about waste minimisation. Basically just allowing people to continue putting out as much rubbish as they always have negates the point of bothering. So I just make the point that part of this is about waste minimisation and trying to get people to change behaviour.
Councillor Gary.
And that segues really nicely into my question, which was about behaviour change. Just wanted to clarify with you, how well understood is it that for those who've composted before, you wouldn't necessarily put meat and fish and bones and so forth in, but you can in the green bin? That's correct, is it not? Yep. So do you think that's well understood?
I do believe that the people that have been serious about composting and doing it for quite some time, yes, they definitely understand what they can and can't do. And for those that aren't sure, we do run the composting workshops as well.
And my second question is, the recommendation is it not to put out your green bin, even if there's a little bit in the bottom, to put it out regularly? That's the recommendation that you're making?
Yeah, I mean, obviously to ensure there isn't any sort of odour issues or anything else generated, yeah, recommendations that goes out every week, whether it needs to or not, basically.
And would it be true that, I think you covered this off, but I just want to check that, and I know I've certainly seen this where people have changed the behaviour about where their bins are necessarily, and while there was a lot of concern we had about people thinking, I'm not going to have room, everyone's made adjustments to that to accommodate that on their particular property.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those. There was probably a bit of angst about where the bins are going to go, and then people have found space. I just noticed in myself driving around Dunedin that where there were bins sitting on the street for quite some time, they've now disappeared onto the property. I guess it's just, yeah, when people have actually realised that they're not huge, they're not all the big 240 litre bins, that they've realised they don't actually take up too much space.
Any more questions? Councillor Mayhem.
Just one really quick one, and I'm not sure if you would gather this information, but I'd like to see going forward. I think there'll be a definite comparison in the reduction in the amount of fly tipping that we have across the city. Does that statistic come to you?
Yeah, it will take some time for that information to filter through, but yes, it is. We're hoping that is a side effect of everyone of not having to go out and buy a plastic bag. Every household, in theory, has a red bin, so it reduces the reasons for fly tipping. Yeah.
That's it. Then I'm going to put it to the committee notes the Waste and Environmental Solutions Activity Report for the period ending 30th of June 2024. Councillor Witherall second. Anybody wish to speak to it? Councillor Gary.
I just want to acknowledge the staff and the extraordinary amount of work around this project in terms of the curbside collection. It's great to have it underway. It's great that it's settled in. I know that as a household we've changed our behaviour. I'm sure that's replicated throughout the city. We have a rural property, a very steep drive. We now take things to the bins, some of them. We have the green bin at the top of the drive. And I'm sure everyone's accommodated it and changed their behaviour around this. We've all become aware of the rubbish we generate, and look at the stats already. And I'm sure they're just going to go in that direction as we become more aware of the waste we generate in our households, and we've got opportunity to deal with it. We are doing so, and all of those considerations were taken into account when we as a council made a decision about what kind of collection we go with, and making it universal so people couldn't opt out. And I just want to take my hat off to the staff. They've got over the period of sorting through the little bumps that always happen when you're settling in a new project, but it is so good to see those black bags gone. And it was late already, we know that. It took time to get it there, but it's something to be really proud of and pleased about. So congratulations. Great to be able to speak about this at this stage.
Any other speakers? I just want to say also congratulate the staff, and I think this is a good indication of good environmental outcomes with good infrastructure. Putting the curbside pickup with the way it's done is giving us the outcomes we're looking for. I'm going to be interested in seeing what happens to the emissions trading scheme charges on our landfill, and I'm basically pointing the finger at Ministry of Environment and say I hope we get rewarded quickly, so as to justify why we've done it as one of the reasons. And to people who are talking about red bin capacity, the red bin was designed at a specific size to bring about change. And it is plenty big enough for 90% of the households, it appears. And I would say there may be a few households that have very specific reasons why they generate so much waste. But other than that, I think that you should be looking at your green bin, your yellow bin and your blue bin and figuring out how much you can actually put into the thing, and maybe just wash that soft plastic and take that to recycling bin. I'm sure you can be able to get your volumes down. Okay, with that I'm going to put it, all those in favour, all those against, carried. Item 13, items for the consideration for the chair. There's two that have come up in this meeting I can think of. One is the speed limit petition from Waitati, which I'm going to basically move to transport, and we'll make sure that goes to the right place. And then Councillor Wiley, can we get that up? Yeah, there it goes. Has been asking for some time about water fountains around the city, so he just wants that brought to an active consideration. So we're not voting on that, I'm just putting it up there. I'm going to bring that forward and we'll follow that up. Are there any more items, Councillor Barker?
I asked that the water strategy be added to the forward work program. Does that need to go under items for consideration by the chair?
Oh, it gets captured there. It can get captured there. Yeah. And that's the integrated systems planning, or?
No, that was the Three Waters Strategy 2011.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Councillor Houlihan?
If allowed, could I quickly say something about that? Because I know Rotary would pay for those, but we couldn't get them put in. Our club has got the fountains that we wanted to put in, but the issue was the connection of the ongoing cost to the infrastructure.
Which I think is more or less what Councillor Wilder wants. So,
thank you.
Yep. Cool. Thank you. Oh yeah, actually, and thank you for and the utilities in the Caversham Tunnel too. We'll get up something on that. Thank you. Okay, that is it for the items for consideration by the chair. I will close with a karakia then. Whakatokata hau ki te uru, whakatokata hau ki te tonga. Kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai. Ki hai ake ana ti atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhau, ti hai Māori ora. And with that, I call the meeting closed at 1:32. Thank you.